Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've never been one to believe in such things. I drove long-haul trucks in Wyoming for about 23 years, and the strangest thing I ever saw during that time was a dust storm that moved as if it had arms. This happened on November 14th, 2019, somewhere between Lander and Rollins on Route 287. It was 2:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was looking at my phone, wondering whether to take a break at the rest stop near Jeffrey City or keep going. The temperature gauge on the dashboard read 38 degrees, and it was cold enough that my breath fogged up the windshield when I breathed near it. The road was empty. Completely empty. Over 23 years, you get used to seeing maybe one or two vehicles in a 3-hour stretch on these desert roads, but that night there was nothing. Just the white lines disappearing under my hood and the darkness closing in on me from all sides. The radio had been cutting in and out for the past 40 minutes, which wasn't unusual. These stretches of highway run through dead zones where you're lucky to get static, but it was the way it cut out that bothered me. It would fade slowly, like someone was turning down a volume knob, then snap back at full blast. Made my heart jump every time. I was about 15 miles past the turnoff to Atlantic City, a ghost town that's actually got a few people still living in it, when I first saw the light. At first, I thought it was another truck coming toward me. A single headlight, maybe a motorcycle or a vehicle with one light out. But it was yellow. Not the white yellow of halogen headlights, but a deep amber, like those old sodium vapor streetlights they used to have in small towns. And it wasn't moving. I watched it for what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds. The light just hung there, directly over the road, maybe a quarter mile ahead. It didn't bob or sway, didn't flicker, just held perfectly still above the double yellow line. My first rational thought was that it had to be some kind of road work, maybe a crane or a lift with a work light. But at 2:47 a.m., on one of the loneliest stretches of highway in Wyoming? I eased off the accelerator, dropping from 70 to about 50. The light didn't get any closer. I dropped to 40. Still no change in perspective. That's when my hands started sweating. You need to understand something about distance perception on these highways. At night, with nothing but your headlights and maybe the moon, your brain has very few reference points. But I'd been driving long enough to know when something wasn't adding up. That light should have been getting larger, more defined. Instead, it stayed the exact same size, the exact same intensity. I dropped to 30 miles per hour. The light remained unchanged. Then my truck started making a noise. It wasn't the engine. I know my rig's engine sounds like I know my own breathing. This was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. A low-frequency hum that I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. The kind of sound that makes your teeth ache and your vision blur slightly at the edges. The radio went completely silent. Not static. Not dead air. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I should have stopped. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to pull over, turn around, go back the way I came. But there was another part of my brain, quieter but somehow stronger, that kept my foot on the accelerator and my hands on the wheel. The distance between my truck and that light started to close. Not because I was speeding up, I was still doing 30, but because the light was getting closer. It was moving toward me. That's when I noticed my speedometer was wrong. The needle said 30, but the white lines on the road were passing underneath my truck way too slow. I looked at my GPS. No signal. I looked at my phone. no bars, and the time display was frozen at 2:47. The light was close now, maybe 50 yards ahead. I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a sphere or a disc. It was shapeless, like looking at a flame through water. The edges rippled and pulsed, but the center remained perfectly still, and it was directly over the double yellow line, hovering at exactly the height of my windshield. I'm not ashamed to say I was terrified. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. But I couldn't stop. Physically, could not stop. My foot was on the accelerator, but it felt like someone else was controlling it, 20 yards. The light was so bright now that I had to squint, but it wasn't blinding. It was like looking at the sun through closed eyelids, that orange-yellow glow that seeps through. 10 yards. I could feel heat radiating through the windshield. Not burning heat, but warmth, like standing near a campfire. 5 yards. The humming in my chest had become so intense that I thought my ribs were going to crack. My vision was starting to tunnel, everything except that light fading to black. Then I passed underneath it. For exactly 3 seconds, the inside of my cab was filled with that amber light. I couldn't see the road, couldn't see my hands on the wheel, couldn't see anything but yellow. The temperature spiked, my skin prickling with sudden sweat. The hum became a high-pitched whine that made my ears ring. Then it was gone. I was through. The light was behind me. I could see it in my rearview mirror, shrinking rapidly as I pulled away. My speedometer jumped back to 70. The radio crackled to life mid-song. My phone showed 2:51 a.m. I drove for another 10 minutes before I trusted myself to pull over. My hands were still shaking and I could smell something burnt, like electrical wiring or scorched metal. I got out of the truck, needed to feel solid ground under my feet. That's when I saw it. The hood of my truck, the chrome bumper, the windshield, all of it. There was no condensation. At 38 degrees in November, after driving through the desert night, there should have been dew forming. There should have been moisture. But every metal surface was bone dry and warm to the touch. I checked the asphalt where I'd pulled over. Cold. I could see my breath, but my truck was warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. I didn't sleep that night. Drove straight through to Lander, unloaded my cargo, and filed a report with the company about mechanical issues. Took 3 days off. Didn't tell anyone what I'd seen because I knew how it sounded. But that's not the end of it, because 3 weeks later, I got a call from another driver, a guy named Hank Dupre, who ran the same route. He asked me if anything weird had happened to me on Route 287 near Jeffrey City. Asked if I'd seen any lights. I lied and said no, but he knew. Somehow, he knew. "If you ever want to talk about it," he said, "I'm around. Because, brother, I've seen it too. And it's been happening a lot longer than you think." I hung up, didn't call him back, but I did start asking around, carefully, quietly. Turns out, Route 287 isn't the only stretch of Wyoming highway where drivers have seen things. Route 191, I-80 through the Red Desert. Highway 789 north of Baggs. The lights are always the same, yellow or white. Perfectly still, hovering over the center line, and always between 2 and 4 a.m. Some drivers report missing time. Some report electronic failures. Some, like me, report heat signatures that make no sense. And some drivers don't report anything at all, because 3 months after my encounter, a truck was found on Route 287, about 12 miles from where I saw the light. The driver was still in the cab, engine running, no signs of struggle. But he was gone. Not dead, not injured, just absent, like he'd stepped out for a cigarette and never came back. His name was Marcus Webb. He'd been driving that route for 16 years, and according to his logbook, the last entry was at 2:47 a.m. Same time, my phone froze. I don't drive Route 287 anymore. I take the long way around, through Casper, even though it adds 3 hours to my trip. Some of the other drivers think I'm superstitious. Maybe I am. But I remember that light. I remember the heat. I remember the feeling of something watching me, studying me, deciding whether or not to let me pass. And I remember what Hank Dupre said when I finally called him back, 6 months later. They're not hurting anyone, Gavin. They're just looking. But the question you need to ask yourself is, what happens when they stop just looking? I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. 15 months before Gavin Blakemore saw his yellow light, I was hauling refrigerated goods up Route 191 from Rock Springs to Pinedale. It was a clear night in August, warm enough that I had the windows down, letting the desert air cycle through the cab. Route 191 is different from 287. It's got more curves, more elevation change. You're running through high desert and scrubland with the Wind River Range visible to the east during daylight. At night, it's just darkness, and the occasional ranch light miles off the highway. I'd made this run probably 200 times, knew every turn, every mile marker, every place where antelope liked to cross. It was routine, boring even until it wasn't. I was about 40 miles south of Pinedale, coming around a long, sweeping curve, when I saw something in my side mirror. A light, close to the road, keeping pace with my truck. At first, I thought it was another vehicle running parallel on a ranch road, but when I looked out the window, there was nothing but empty scrubland. The light was only visible in the mirror. I adjusted the mirror, thinking maybe I was catching a reflection of my own taillights or something from inside the cab. The light adjusted with it, staying in the same relative position, always just at the edge of the mirror's field of view. It was white, bright, and perfectly round, about the size of a basketball if you held it at arm's length, and it was moving at exactly my speed, maintaining the same distance. I sped up to 75. The light kept pace. I dropped to 50. No change. That's when I made a mistake. I turned off my headlights. It was stupid, dangerous, illegal, all of those things. But I needed to know if the light was a reflection, some trick of my own truck's lights bouncing off something. The highway went dark. The white lines vanished. I could barely see the road in front of me. The light in my mirror got brighter. Now it was the only thing I could see. Everything else, the desert, the road, even my own dashboard, had faded to black. Just that white sphere, perfectly round, perfectly still in the mirror, getting brighter and brighter until I had to squint against the glare. I flipped the headlights back on. The light dimmed slightly but didn't disappear. It just sat there in my mirror, watching. I drove like that for 11 miles. 11 miles with that thing following me, visible only in the reflection. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept checking the passenger mirror, looking out the windows, even craning around to look through the cab's rear window. Nothing. The light only existed in my driver's side mirror. Then I passed under a railroad bridge. In the half-second of shadow, the light disappeared. When I came out the other side, the mirror was clear. Just the empty highway behind me, stretching into darkness. I pulled over immediately, hands shaking, sweat running down my back despite the cool night air. I got out and walked around the truck, checking every surface, every angle, looking for some rational explanation. That's when I noticed the mirror itself. The glass was cold. Freezing cold. I touched it and pulled my hand back immediately. It was like touching ice, that kind of cold that burns. But the air temperature was probably 65 degrees, and the rest of the truck was warm from the engine. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. For just a moment, less than a second, I could swear there was someone else standing behind me. A shape, tall, thin, perfectly still. Then I blinked and it was gone. I got back in the truck and drove straight to Pinedale without stopping. When I parked at the depot, the first thing I did was check that mirror again. It was normal temperature, warm even, from sitting in the sun all day. I asked the other drivers if they'd seen anything weird on 191. Most of them laughed it off. But one guy, an older driver named Frank Kowalski, pulled me aside. "You saw something in your mirror," he said. Not a question, a statement. I nodded. "White light?" "Yeah. Followed you for a while, then disappeared when you went under something. How did you know?" Frank looked around, making sure no one else was listening. "Because it's happened to 4 drivers I know personally. Always Route 191, always southbound, always in the mirrors. Some see white lights, some see shapes. One guy said he saw his own truck following him like a perfect copy, but there was someone else in the driver's seat. What is it? Don't know. Don't want to know. But I'll tell you what I tell everyone. When you see it, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't try to interact with it. And for God's sake, don't turn off your headlights. Just keep driving until it goes away." "Has anyone ever stopped?" Frank's expression went dark. "Yeah, 3 years ago. Driver named Melissa Chen. She saw the light, got curious, pulled over to investigate. They found her truck the next morning. Engine still running. Driver's door wide open. She was sitting in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Responsive. Physically fine, but she wouldn't talk. Couldn't talk, maybe. They took her to the hospital in Rock Springs. She stayed there for 2 weeks, just staring. Did she ever say what happened? Eventually. Said she got out of the truck to look at the mirror. The light came out of the glass. Just emerged like something pushing through water. She said it touched her, and everything went white. Next thing she remembered, she was in the passenger seat and the sun was coming up. Is she okay now? She doesn't drive anymore. Works at a truck stop outside of Casper, but she won't talk about that night. Someone brings it up, she just walks away. I've driven Route 191 probably 100 times since then. I've seen the light 3 more times. Each time, I do exactly what Frank told me. I keep my headlights on, maintain speed, and don't stop until it's gone. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The last time I saw it, about 6 months ago, it didn't disappear when I went under the railroad bridge. It stayed in the mirror for another 20 miles before finally fading. And right before it vanished, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a second light. Smaller, dimmer, but there. And it wasn't following my truck, it was following the first light. Like whatever was watching me was also being watched by something else. I haven't told anyone about that second light. Not Frank, not the other drivers, not even my wife. Because if there's something out there studying us, and there's something else out there studying them, then we're not dealing with one mystery. We're dealing with layers of mysteries, each one stranger and more terrifying than the last. And I have no idea how deep it goes. I've been a Wyoming highway patrol officer for 11 years. I've seen car accidents that should have killed everyone involved, but somehow didn't. I've seen drunk drivers walk away from crashes that turned their vehicles into scrap metal. I've seen bizarre weather, strange animal behavior, and once, a meteorite impact about 100 yards from the highway. But nothing prepared me for the silent mile. It happened on March 8, 2020, just before the world shut down for COVID. I was on night patrol on I-80 through the Red Desert, one of the most desolate stretches of interstate in the country. 80 miles of absolutely nothing between Rock Springs and Rollins. The shift started normal. I'd pulled over 2 speeders, helped a couple with a flat tire, and was getting ready to head back to the station when dispatch radioed with a weird call. A trucker had reported seeing unusual lights about 15 miles east of Point of Rocks. No other details, no other witnesses. Dispatch wanted me to check it out before logging it as a non-incident. I headed east on I-80. It was 3:17 a.m. according to my dashcam's timestamp. Temperature was 31 degrees, clear sky, no moon, stars so bright they looked fake. The desert stretched out on both sides of the highway, flat and featureless. During the day, you can see for miles. At night, it's like driving through a void. Your headlights are the only thing that exists. I was about 12 miles from Point of Rocks when I noticed the silence. My radio had gone quiet. Not dead, just quiet, no static, no distant chatter from other units, nothing. I reached down to check it, and that's when I realized I couldn't hear my engine either. I was doing 70 miles per hour, and I couldn't hear anything. No road noise, no wind, no engine vibration. My patrol car was completely, impossibly silent. I let off the accelerator, coasting, and watched my speedometer. 70, 65, 60, 55. The numbers dropped, but I felt no deceleration, no sense of slowing down. I pressed the brake pedal. The brake lights came on. I could see them reflected on the signs I passed, but I felt nothing. I was moving, covering distance, but experiencing none of the physical sensations that should accompany it. Then I saw the lights. They appeared on the horizon, 3 of them in a perfect line. Blue-white, intensely bright, hovering about 20 feet off the ground. They were spaced exactly evenly, maybe 50 yards apart, running parallel to the highway on the south side. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got visual on the reported lights. I-80 eastbound mile marker 154. Request backup." Nothing, not even static. I tried my cell phone, no signal. Tried the emergency channel on the radio. Dead. The lights were getting closer. I was still coasting, still slowing down according to the speedometer, but the lights were approaching fast. Too fast for my speed to account for. That's when I realized they weren't approaching me. I was approaching them. My car was still moving forward at highway speed, but I couldn't feel it. The speedometer was lying. I tried to steer toward the shoulder, thinking I could pull off and wait this out. The wheel turned smoothly in my hands, but the car didn't change direction. I was locked on course, heading straight toward those 3 lights. The dash cam was still recording. I could see the red light blinking. Whatever was happening, it was being documented. The lights were close now, maybe 100 yards. I could see they weren't spheres. They were more like vertical columns of light, perfectly straight, extending from the ground up about 20 feet. They didn't cast shadows. They didn't illuminate the surrounding desert. They just existed as isolated pillars of brightness. 50 yards. I could feel something now. Not sound, not vibration, but a pressure, like the air itself was pushing against my body, gentle but insistent. My ears popped twice in quick succession. 25 yards. The pressure increased. I could feel it in my chest, making it slightly harder to breathe. My vision started to blur at the edges. 10 yards. The light from the columns was bright enough that I should have been blinded, but I could still see. The steering wheel, the dashboard, my hands, everything had taken on a blue-white tint. Then I drove through them. For exactly 1.3 seconds, according to the dashcam playback I watched later, I was inside the light, not passing by it, but moving through it. The blue-white glow filled the interior of the car completely. I couldn't see the hood, couldn't see the road, couldn't see my own hands gripping the wheel. All I could see was light, and in that light, shapes. They weren't solid. They moved like shadows, but they were darker than the darkness around them. Thin, elongated, moving with a fluid grace that didn't look quite right. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more, surrounding the car. One of them got close to my window. I could see details. Long limbs, a narrow head, something that might have been eyes, but they were just darker spots in an already dark shape. It reached toward the glass. Then I was through. The light was behind me. The shapes were gone. Sound rushed back in like a physical force. The roar of my engine, the hum of tires on asphalt, the crackle of the radio all hitting me at once. Unit 7, do you copy? Unit 7, respond. It was dispatch. They sounded frantic. Unit 7 responding, I managed to say. My voice sounded wrong, too high, too shaky. What's your location? You went radio silent for 23 minutes. 23 minutes. I looked at my dashboard clock. It was 3:41 a.m. I'd entered the silent zone at 3:17. That was 24 minutes, but I'd only experienced maybe 5 minutes of actual time. I pulled over, hands trembling so badly I nearly ran onto the shoulder too hard. I sat there, engine running, trying to process what had happened. Then I checked the dash cam. The footage was corrupted for exactly 84 seconds. The timestamp jumped from 3:17:33 to 3:18:57. In between, just static and brief flashes of that blue-white light. But here's what terrified me. In those brief flashes, I could see myself in the reflection of the windshield. And I wasn't alone in the car. There was a shape in the passenger seat. Tall, thin, leaning toward me. In one flash, just one single frame, I could see what might have been a hand reaching toward my shoulder. I filed a report, called it unusual atmospheric conditions and possible equipment malfunction. Didn't mention the shapes, the silence, the lost time. But I included the corrupted dashcam footage. 3 days later, I got a call from someone claiming to be with the Department of Transportation. They wanted the original footage. I told them I'd already submitted it with my report. They said they needed the physical SD card from the camera. I refused. Something about the way they asked made me uncomfortable. 2 weeks later, my patrol car was broken into while parked at my apartment. Nothing was stolen. The glove box was open, the dashcam housing was cracked, but the SD card was still in my pocket. I made copies, sent them to 3 different people I trusted, told them if anything happened to me, to release them publicly. Nothing has happened yet, but I did some research, reached out quietly to other officers, other drivers, other people who travel I-80 through the Red Desert regularly. And I found something. There's a stretch of highway, about 1.2 miles long, between mile markers 154 and 155.3. Multiple people have reported the same thing I experienced. Silence. Lost time. Lights. Shapes. They call it the Silent Mile, and it's not new. I found references to it going back to the 1970s. Truckers avoiding that stretch, taking the old highway instead. Reports filed and then buried. Witnesses who stopped talking about what they saw. One report from 1983 caught my attention. A highway patrol officer named Douglas Mitchell reported seeing non-terrestrial entities on I-80 near Point of Rocks. He was suspended for psychiatric evaluation. 6 months later, he resigned from the force. I found him. He's 73 now, living in a retirement community in Cheyenne. I drove up to talk to him, off duty, off the record. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You drove through them, didn't you?" he said. I nodded. "And they let you go." "What do you mean, let me go? You're here. You're alive. You remember what happened. That means they decided you weren't worth keeping." "Keeping for what?" "I don't know, and I've spent 37 years trying not to think about it." He told me his story. It was identical to mine, down to the dashboard clock showing lost time, the corrupted footage, the feeling of being watched. But there was one detail he added that I hadn't experienced. "After I drove through," he said, I looked in my rearview mirror. The lights were still there, but they were closer together, like they were reforming, and I could see something between them. Something big, bigger than my car, hovering just above the ground. It had the shape of those things, the thin ones, but it was massive, and it was looking at me. I could feel it looking at me. What did you do? I drove until I hit Rollins, pulled into the station and told my supervisor everything. Biggest mistake of my life. They thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. Do you still drive I-80? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I don't drive anywhere at night anymore, and I sure as hell don't go anywhere near the Red Desert. I thanked him for his time, started to leave. He called after me. "Officer Vickers, one more thing." I turned back. If you see them again, and you will, they always come back. Don't stop. Don't try to interact. Don't try to understand. Just drive through and keep going. Because the ones who stop, the ones who get curious, they're the ones who disappear. Disappear? 3 people I know personally, good people, smart people. They saw the lights, stopped to investigate, and were never seen again. Their vehicles were found, empty, engines running, doors open, but they were gone. I drove back to Rollins in silence, kept my radio on, kept my phone charged, kept my eyes on the road. That was 6 months ago. I still patrol I-80, but I make sure I'm never in the silent mile between 3 and 4 a.m. I swap shifts, take detours, do whatever I have to do to avoid being there during that window. But last week, I got a call from dispatch. Another trucker reporting lights, same location, same time. This time, 2 lights. But they were different colors, one blue-white and one yellow. They're changing, adapting, or maybe they're multiplying. I don't know which possibility scares me more. This is where things get complicated, because what I'm about to tell you involves 4 different people, all experiencing the same event from different perspectives, and none of them knowing about the others until weeks later. The junction where Highway 789 meets Route 28, about 30 miles south of Lander, is one of those places that looks like nothing during the day. Gas station, closed restaurant, a few ranch roads leading off into the wilderness. At night, it's a crossroads in the most literal sense. 4 directions, infinite darkness, and the occasional vehicle passing through. On January 19, 2021, at approximately 3:33 a.m., 4 people converged on that junction. I was transporting a patient from Lander to Riverton, non-emergency transfer, elderly woman with pneumonia who needed a higher level of care. My partner was driving. I was in the back with the patient, monitoring vitals. We were about a mile from the junction when all our electronics went haywire. The GPS started showing our location as 3 different places simultaneously. The heart monitor attached to our patient began registering a pulse of 240 BPM, which was impossible because I was physically counting her pulse at 78. My partner, James, called back to me. "Maria, are you seeing this?" I moved to the front. Through the windshield I could see the junction ahead, and above it, maybe 50 feet in the air, there was something that looked like a star that had fallen too close to Earth. It was white, intensely bright, and it was rotating. Not spinning like a top, but folding in on itself, like watching a flower bloom in reverse over and over again. The light it cast wasn't normal. It didn't spread out in a circle. It came down in discrete beams, 4 of them, pointing at the 4 roads that met at the junction. "What is that?" James whispered. I didn't answer. I was watching the beams. They were moving, slowly sweeping across the landscape like searchlights. One of them passed over our ambulance. The moment it touched us, everything stopped. The engine cut out. The emergency lights went dark. The heart monitor flatlined, not because our patient died, but because it simply stopped working. James and I both stopped moving, not paralyzed, but frozen in a moment of perfect stillness. I could see everything with absolute clarity. The steering wheel, the dashboard, the reflection of my own face in the windshield. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. And I could see the other vehicles. There were 3 of them, caught in the other 3 light beams. A semi-truck coming from the north, a pickup truck from the east, a sedan from the west, all of them frozen, just like us. The rotating light above the junction began to descend. Slowly, carefully, like it was being lowered by invisible cables. It got close enough that I could see it wasn't solid. It was made of countless smaller lights, all moving independently but somehow forming a cohesive whole. Then it touched the ground. The moment it made contact with the asphalt, all 4 beams intensified. I felt a vibration in my chest, felt my vision blur, felt a sensation like falling even though I was sitting still. And I heard a sound, not through my ears, inside my head. A voice that wasn't a voice, communicating in a way that bypassed language entirely. It said, "You are seen." That's it. 3 words that carried the weight of absolute certainty. We were being observed, cataloged, understood in a way that made me feel completely exposed. Then the light snapped off like someone had flipped a switch. The beams disappeared. The rotating thing in the center of the junction shot straight up into the sky and vanished. Everything came back at once. The engine roared to life. The heart monitor started beeping. James gasped like he'd been holding his breath. Our patient moaned softly but didn't wake up. I checked her vitals. Normal. No indication that anything had happened. James drove us to Riverton without saying a word. We delivered our patient, filed our report, went home. 3 weeks later, I saw a news story about a truck driver who was claiming he'd seen a UFO at the 78928 junction. I called the number in the article. That's how I met the others. I was hauling produce from Colorado to Montana, running ahead of schedule, when I hit the junction. I'd been through there 100 times. Never saw anything more interesting than a coyote. But that night, I saw the light. Thought at first it was a helicopter, maybe life flight or something. Then I realized it was way too bright, way too still. When that beam hit my truck, everything just stopped. Engine, radio, even the digital clock. I sat there, unable to move, watching that thing descend. And I saw the others, the ambulance, the pickup, the sedan, all of us caught in those beams like insects under a magnifying glass. Here's the part that nobody believes. When that thing touched the ground, I could see inside my own truck, like my vision had somehow expanded to include a bird's-eye view. I could see myself sitting in the driver's seat, could see the cargo in the back, could see the tire tread and the undercarriage. And I could see something attached to the bottom of my truck. A small box, maybe 6 inches on each side, metallic, with no seams or openings. It was held in place by what looked like magnets. I'd never seen it before. Had no idea it was there. When the light disappeared and I could move again, I pulled over immediately. Got under the truck with a flashlight. Found the box exactly where I'd seen it in that impossible vision. I couldn't get it off. The magnetic hold was too strong. Tried for 20 minutes before giving up. 3 days later, my truck was in the shop for routine maintenance. I told the mechanic about the box, asked him to remove it. He got under there, came back out 10 minutes later looking confused. "There's nothing under there, Bobby, not even any marks where something might have been attached." I looked myself. He was right. The box was gone. But here's what terrifies me. My cargo that night was apples. 12,000 pounds of apples in refrigerated storage. When I delivered them 2 days later, The warehouse refused the shipment. "These aren't fresh," the manager said. "These are at least 3 weeks old." I showed him my bill of lading, picked up 4 days ago, but he had them tested. The apples were 3 weeks past their prime. Somewhere between that junction and my delivery point, time had passed differently for my cargo than it had for me. I was driving from Rawlins to Lander for a new assignment. Took Route 28 because it was more scenic, even at night. I'm originally from Seattle, so Wyoming's open spaces still fascinate me. I saw the light from about 2 miles away. Thought maybe there was an accident, emergency vehicles. But as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. When the beam hit my car, I experienced something different from the others. Instead of stopping, I kept moving. But everything outside my car stopped. The road beneath my wheels was frozen. I could see individual pieces of gravel suspended in place. A tumbleweed caught mid-roll. Even the wind had stopped, the grass on the roadside standing perfectly still. But I was moving through it, like swimming through molasses. My car was still running, still covering ground, but everything else had frozen in time. I saw the others in their vehicles, the ambulance, the truck, the pickup. They looked like mannequins, perfectly still, eyes open but not seeing. And I saw something else. There were figures standing on the road. Tall, impossibly thin, moving between the frozen vehicles. They didn't walk, they glided. And they were examining everything. One of them approached my car. I couldn't stop, couldn't swerve, just kept moving forward at that slow, inevitable pace. It stood in front of my windshield, and I drove right through it. For a moment, I was inside it. Or it was inside me. I felt something cold and curious moving through my thoughts, examining my memories like files in a cabinet. I felt it pause on certain moments. My daughter's birth, my mother's death, the day I decided to become a nurse. Then I was through. The figure was behind me. The others were still doing their examination of the frozen vehicles. And I was still moving, still trapped in that slow-motion drive through a stopped world. When I reached the center of the junction, where that rotating light was touching the ground, time snapped back to normal. The other vehicles started moving again. The figures disappeared. I pulled over a mile down the road, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I sat there for an hour before I could drive again. The next day, I noticed something odd. I have a birthmark on my left shoulder. Had it my whole life. It's shaped like a crescent moon. It's gone now, just smooth skin where it used to be. I've been to 3 dermatologists. They all say the same thing. There's no scar tissue, no indication anything was ever removed. The skin is completely normal, but I had that birthmark for 34 years, and now it's gone. I was coming back from a bar in Lander. Probably shouldn't have been driving, but the roads were empty and I was only 10 miles from home. Saw the light at the junction and thought it was cops. Almost turned around. When that beam hit my truck, I didn't stop like the others, and I didn't keep moving like Jennifer. I went somewhere else entirely. 1 second I was on Highway 789. The next, I was in a place that had no reference points. No ground, no sky, just gray in every direction. My truck was gone. I was just standing in this gray void. And I wasn't alone. There were others there. Human others. A woman who looked terrified. A man who was crying. A young guy, maybe early 20s, who kept saying, "This isn't real. This isn't real," over and over. We could see each other, but we couldn't touch. It was like we were all in separate spaces that happened to overlap visually. Then they came. The figures. Tall, thin, moving through the gray like they owned it. They went to each person, one by one. When they reached the crying man, they did something that made him stop crying and start smiling. Not a happy smile. an empty smile. When they reached me, I felt that same cold curiosity that Jennifer described. But I also felt something else. Recognition, like they'd seen me before. One of them, I think it was the same one each time, but they all looked identical, reached out and touched my forehead. I felt a sharp pain, then a flood of images, roads, highways, junctions, all across Wyoming. And at each one, a light. Sometimes yellow, sometimes white, sometimes blue. But always watching, always recording. Then I was back in my truck. The light was gone. The junction was empty except for the other 3 vehicles pulling away. I drove home in a daze. Didn't sleep that night. Kept seeing those images. The roads, the lights, the pattern they formed when you connected them all. They spell something. I spent 3 weeks mapping it out, using reports from every witness I could find, every sighting, every encounter. Connected them all on a map of Wyoming. The lights form a grid, perfectly spaced, covering the entire state, and they're moving closer together. In 1970, the first recorded sighting was in the Red Desert. By 1990, sightings were reported statewide but spaced about 100 miles apart. By 2010, the spacing had dropped to 50 miles. Now, in 2021, they're less than 30 miles apart. At the current rate of expansion, by 2025, there won't be a single stretch of Wyoming highway more than 10 miles from a documented sighting location. Whatever they're doing, they're almost done. We all met, the 4 of us, 3 weeks after the junction incident. Compared notes, shared experiences, tried to make sense of it. Maria thinks they're studying us, trying to understand human behavior, human biology. Bobby thinks they're marking us somehow, tracking us, using those devices he saw under his truck. Jennifer thinks they're changing us, altering us in small ways we don't notice. Dale thinks they're preparing for something bigger. I think they're all right. Because 2 weeks ago, Dale called us in a panic. He'd been monitoring the reports, tracking the sightings, and he'd noticed something new. The lights aren't just appearing over roads anymore. They're appearing over towns. Small towns at first. Jeffrey City, Baggs, Muddy Gap. Places with populations under 100. The lights would appear, hover for exactly 90 seconds, then disappear. No one reports missing time. No one reports encounters. The lights just appear, do whatever they're doing, and leave. But last week, a light appeared over Rawlins. Population 9,000. It stayed for 3 minutes. Whatever they're building toward, it's accelerating, and we have no idea how to stop it. I've been a Wyoming Highway Patrol officer for 7 years. In that time, I've learned that radio silence is part of the job. You drive through dead zones. Your signal cuts out. You keep moving until you hit the coverage again. It's annoying but predictable. What happened at mile 118 on Route 287 wasn't predictable. It was October 23rd, 2021. Temperature had dropped to 28 degrees by the time my shift started at 11 p.m. Clear sky, no precipitation, good visibility. Standard autumn night patrol from Rawlins to Lander. I was running solo that night. My usual partner, Officer Martinez, had called in sick, so it was just me, my Crown Victoria, and about 80 miles of empty highway. I didn't mind. Sometimes the solitude was exactly what I needed after dealing with the chaos of the station. The radio had been quiet most of the night. A few check-ins from dispatch, a livestock warning near Jeffrey City, nothing unusual. I was at mile 114, doing about 65, when I noticed the static. It started as a low hiss underneath the dispatcher's voice. Not loud, but persistent, like someone had tuned the radio slightly off station. I reached down to adjust it, but before I could touch the dial, it cleared up on its own. "Unit 12, your signal's breaking up." dispatch said. Copy that, dispatch. I'm approaching mile 115. Should clear up soon. Negative, Unit 12. We're showing you with full bars. Must be something on your end. I checked my radio. All indicators showed strong signal. But the static was getting louder, creeping in around the edges of every transmission. Mile 116. The static was constant now, a white noise roar that made it hard to hear anything else. I turned down the volume, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was everywhere, filling the car like pressure before a storm. Mile 117. My dashboard lights flickered. Just once, just for a second, but enough to make my pulse quicken. I checked my gauges. Everything normal. Engine temperature, oil pressure, battery voltage, all in the green. Then I hit mile 118. The radio went silent. Not static, not dead air. Silent. Like someone had severed the connection between my car and the rest of the world. I grabbed the handset. Dispatch, this is Unit 12, radio check. Nothing. Not even the click of the transmission going through. Dispatch, Unit 12, do you copy? Silence. I checked my phone. No signal, 0 bars. That wasn't unusual out here, but the timing made my skin prickle. The road ahead was empty, the white and yellow lines disappearing into darkness. My headlights seemed weaker somehow, like they weren't reaching as far as they should. I thought maybe the bulbs were dying, but they'd been replaced less than a month ago. I kept driving. What else was I going to do? Pull over and wait in the dark until the radio came back? The protocol for radio failure was to continue to the next checkpoint and report the malfunction. The next checkpoint was the rest area at mile 125. 7 miles. I could do 7 miles. Mile 119. Still no radio, still no phone signal. But something else was wrong now. The air felt different, thicker. Like driving through humidity, except the temperature gauge showed it was still 28 degrees outside. I could see my breath fogging up the inside of the windshield, but I wasn't breathing any harder than normal. I turned on the defroster. It cleared the glass, but the fog kept coming back, faster each time. Mile 120. A sound started. Low frequency, barely audible, more felt than heard. It reminded me of standing too close to a subwoofer, that chest-vibrating bass that makes your organs feel loose. But there was no music, no source for the sound. It was just there, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. My hands were sweating despite the cold. I wiped them on my uniform pants, checked the rearview mirror. Nothing behind me, nothing ahead. Just empty road and that suffocating darkness that my headlights couldn't seem to penetrate. Mile 121. The vibration in my chest was stronger now. My vision started to blur slightly at the edges. I blinked hard, shook my head, tried to focus. The white lines on the road seemed to be moving, undulating like they were painted on water instead of asphalt. I needed to pull over. This was wrong. All of it was wrong, and I needed to stop and figure out what was happening. But my hands wouldn't turn the wheel. They stayed locked at 10 and 2, keeping the car perfectly centered in the lane. That's when I saw the light. It appeared in my rearview mirror, distant but bright. White, intense, moving fast. My first thought was another vehicle, maybe a truck with high beams. But it was too high off the ground, too bright, and it was gaining on me impossibly fast. I pressed the accelerator. 65 became 70. 70 became 75. The light kept getting closer. Mile 122. The light was maybe 50 yards behind me now, close enough that I could see it wasn't coming from headlights. It was a sphere, perfectly round, hovering about 20 feet off the ground, and it was pacing me, maintaining the exact same distance no matter how fast I went. 80 miles per hour, 85. The speedometer needle was climbing, but I didn't feel like I was going faster. No increase in engine noise, no change in the sensation of speed. Just the numbers going up while the world outside stayed locked in that same suffocating stillness. Mile 123. The light was directly behind me now, so bright I couldn't see anything in my mirrors. The interior of my car was flooded with white radiance. Every surface, every control, my own hands on the wheel, all bleached colorless by that overwhelming glow. I couldn't see the road ahead, couldn't see the dashboard, couldn't see anything except white. But I was still moving. I could feel the slight vibration of the tires on asphalt, could hear the muffled hum of the engine, could sense the passage of time even though everything visual had been consumed by light. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The light snapped off. My mirrors showed only darkness. The road ahead was visible again, my headlights cutting through the night like they were supposed to. My speedometer read 65, mile 124. The radio crackled to life. It 12, come in, Unit 12, respond immediately. It was dispatch, and she sounded frantic. Unit 12 responding, I said. My voice came out shaky, breathless. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I looked at my dashboard clock. It was 12:47 a.m. When I'd hit mile 118, it had been 12:31. 16 minutes had passed, but it had felt like 3 or 4 at most. I experienced radio failure. Total signal loss. I was following protocol, heading to the next checkpoint. We show you at mile 124, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. You were at mile 118 16 minutes ago. You're telling me you've only traveled 6 miles in 16 minutes? I did the math in my head. At 65 miles per hour, I should have covered over 17 miles in 16 minutes. But I'd only gone 6. That can't be right, I said. I've been maintaining speed the whole time. Well, your GPS tracking says otherwise. Are you experiencing any vehicle problems? Any medical issues? No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Pull into the rest area at 125 and run a full vehicle diagnostic. And Tessa, get yourself checked out when you get back. Martinez can cover the rest of your shift if needed. Copy that. Mile 125. The rest area appeared ahead, a small oasis of fluorescent lights in the darkness. I pulled in, parked under the lights, and sat there for a long moment with the engine running. My hands were still trembling. I could feel my pulse in my throat, rapid and irregular. I got out of the car, needed to feel solid ground under my feet, needed to confirm that the world outside was still real and solid. The air was cold, sharp, clean, normal October air. I walked around the patrol car, checking every surface, every panel, looking for, I didn't know what, evidence, proof, something to explain what had just happened. The car looked normal, no damage, no unusual wear, nothing out of place. I popped the hood, checked the engine. Everything was as it should be. I was about to close the hood when I noticed something strange. The battery terminals were warm. Not hot, but warm. Like they'd been running under heavy load. But that made no sense. All I'd done was drive. The electrical system shouldn't have been working any harder than normal. I closed the hood, got back in the car, and started documenting everything in my incident log. Time, location, description of the radio failure, the light, the time discrepancy. I wrote it all down in precise clinical language that made it sound routine, made it sound explainable. But I knew it wasn't. I sat in that rest area for 45 minutes, running diagnostics, checking systems, trying to convince myself that this was a mechanical failure. A glitch. Something rational. At 1:35 a.m., I got a call on my radio. Not dispatch. A different voice. Male, older. Unit 12, this is Unit 7. Officer Vickers. Sarah Vickers. I knew her by reputation. 15-year veteran, tough as nails, didn't take shit from anyone. We'd met once at a training seminar but had never worked together. This is Unit 12, Rowley. Go ahead. I heard your radio traffic. The dead zone at mile 118. I need to talk to you about that, not over the radio, in person. I'm at the rest area at 125. Stay there. I'm 20 minutes out. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there in the fluorescent glow, watching the empty highway, waiting. 3 vehicles passed during that 20 minutes. A semi hauling livestock, a sedan with out-of-state plates, a pickup truck with a camper shell. All 3 of them slowed down as they passed mile 118. All 3 of them sped up again immediately after, like they could feel it. Whatever was there, whatever had grabbed hold of my radio and my car and 6 miles of my life, they could sense it even if they didn't consciously know what they were sensing. Unit 7 pulled into the rest area at 1:58 a.m. Officer Vickers got out, tall and lean, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. She looked at my patrol car, then at me, and I could see recognition in her eyes. "You saw the light," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "White? Spherical? Moved like it was tracking you?" "How did you know?" "Because I've seen it too, 3 times. And you're not the first officer to experience radio failure at mile 118. She looked back at the highway, her expression grim. "You're the 7th in the past 2 years. I run a tow and recovery service out of Rawlins. Been doing it for 19 years. I've pulled cars out of ditches, hauled broken-down semis, recovered vehicles from accidents that should have killed everyone involved. I've seen weird things out on these highways. Animal behavior that doesn't make sense. Weather that comes out of nowhere. Rocks on the road that weren't there 5 minutes before. But I'd never seen anything like what happened at mile 118. The call came in at 2:17 a.m. on October 24th, 2021. Day after Tessa Rowley's incident, though I didn't know about that at the time. Dispatch said there was a disabled vehicle on Route 287, mile 118. Driver was requesting a tow to Lander. "What's the problem with the vehicle?" I asked. Driver says it just stopped. Engine died, won't restart. Did they try jumping it? Driver says all the electrics are dead, no power at all. That sounded like a bad alternator or a completely drained battery. Simple fix, usually. I grabbed my jump box and headed out. The drive from Rawlins to mile 118 takes about 45 minutes at night when there's no traffic. I made it in 38, pushing a little harder than I should have. The sooner I got there, the sooner I could get the customer back on the road and get home to bed. Mile 115. My radio started acting up. I run a CB radio in my truck, mostly listen to truckers calling out road conditions and hazards. The chatter had been steady most of the night, but as I approached 115, it started to fade. Not cutting out, just gradually getting quieter, like someone was slowly turning down the volume. By mile 116, it was completely silent. I reached down to check the unit. Power was on, all indicators showed it was working, but there was no sound. No static, no voices, nothing. Mile 117. My truck's headlights started doing something strange. They were on. I could see them illuminating the road, but the light wasn't traveling as far as it should. Normally, my high beams reach out a couple 100 feet, enough to see well ahead and spot any obstacles. but the light was stopping about 50 feet from the truck. Not dimming. Stopping. Like there was an invisible wall out there that the light couldn't penetrate. It would hit this boundary and just end. The road beyond that point was pitch black, darker than it should be even without headlights. I slowed down to 40, then 35, trying to keep whatever was ahead of me within my abbreviated light range. It was disorienting as hell, like driving with your eyes half closed. Male 118. I saw the disabled vehicle. A dark blue Honda Accord pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. I pulled up behind it, positioned my truck so my lights would illuminate the work area. Except they didn't. My headlights were on. I could see the beams extending from the truck, but they weren't reaching the Honda. The light stopped about 15 feet short, leaving the disabled car in complete darkness. I tried my work lights. Same thing. The light extended out, hit that invisible barrier, and stopped. The Honda sat in shadow like it was behind a curtain. I got out of my truck, flashlight in hand. The flashlight worked normally, illuminating the ground, my truck, my own hands. But when I pointed it toward the Honda, the beam stopped short. Just like the headlights. "Hello?" I called out. "Roadside assistance." A figure emerged from the Honda, male, probably mid-30s, wearing a jacket and jeans. He walked toward me, and the moment he crossed that invisible line where my lights stopped, he was suddenly illuminated, like he'd stepped through a barrier between darkness and light. "Thank God," he said. His voice was shaky. "I've been here for almost an hour. My phone's dead, my car's dead, everything just stopped working." "What happened?" "I don't know. I was driving along, radio was acting weird, and then the engine just cut out. No warning, no sputtering, just dead. I tried to restart it, but nothing. No lights, no power, nothing." I walked past him toward the Honda. My flashlight still pointed ahead. The beam continued to stop short of the vehicle. I kept walking until I crossed that invisible line. The moment I did, everything changed. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath, thick and white, even though it had been only 28 degrees before. Now it felt like it was below zero. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. I was standing in absolute darkness. Not the darkness of night, where your eyes adjust and you can make out shapes and shadows. This was complete, total absence of light. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Couldn't see the Honda, even though I knew it was right there. Couldn't see anything. "Hey!" the driver called out. His voice sounded distant, muffled, like he was shouting from inside a building. "You okay?" I tried to respond, but my voice came out wrong, distorted, like speaking underwater. I took a step backward, back toward where I'd come from. The moment I crossed that invisible line again, light returned. My flashlight flickered back to life. The temperature rose back to normal. I could breathe again. The driver was staring at me, his face pale. "You saw it too, didn't you?" "The darkness. What the hell is that?" "I don't know, but it's around my car. I can't get close to it without going into that, and I am not going back in there." I looked at my truck. The headlights were still on, still stopping short of the Honda. I looked at my flashlight, working normally everywhere except when pointed at the vehicle. This was beyond my pay grade. This was beyond anything I'd ever encountered. "I'm calling this in," I said, reaching for my phone. No signal. Of course, no signal. I went back to my truck, tried the CB radio. Dead. Tried my phone again. Nothing. The driver came up beside me. "I already tried. No signal out here. Nothing works. How long have you been stuck?" "Since about 1:30. I called dispatch right when it happened before my phone died. They said they'd send someone. It was 3:04 a.m. He'd been waiting for an hour and a half. Okay, I said, trying to think through the problem logically. Your car is in some kind of dead zone. My lights won't reach it, my radio doesn't work here, and there's something wrong with the air around it. We need to get it out of that zone. How? I can't even get to it without that darkness. I looked at my equipment. I had a winch on the front of my truck. The cable was 100 feet long. If I could hook it to the Honda, I could pull it back toward my truck, out of whatever field it was sitting in. I'm going to try something, I said. Stay here. I got back in my truck, positioned it so the winch was pointing toward the Honda, and started unspooling cable. The steel cable played out smoothly, extending toward the disabled car. As it approached that invisible barrier, the cable slowed, not because it was running out of tension, but like it was pushing through something thick, like trying to spool cable through mud. I gave it more power. The winch motor strained, cable creeping forward inch by inch. The sound of the motor changed pitch, working harder than it should for such a simple task. The cable stopped about 5 feet short of the Honda's front bumper. I tried giving it more power, but the winch motor was already maxed out. Whatever resistance the cable was encountering was too strong. I'm going to have to go in there, I said to the driver. Hook it manually. No, don't. I'm telling you, there's something wrong in there. Your car needs to be moved. It's a road hazard, and I'm not leaving you stranded. I grabbed my heavy-duty work gloves and a tow hook from the truck bed, took a deep breath, crossed the invisible line into the darkness. The cold hit me immediately, that bone-deep freeze that made my teeth ache. My flashlight died again. The world went black. But I could still feel the ground under my feet, could still sense the shape of the Honda in front of me, even if I couldn't see it. I moved forward slowly, hands outstretched until my fingers touched metal. The car was ice cold. Frost had formed on every surface, thick and crystalline. I felt along the front end until I found the tow hook mount. Worked by touch alone, attaching the hook, checking the connection, making sure it was secure. Something moved in the darkness. Not the driver, not me. Something else. I froze, every muscle locked. Listened, there. A sound like breathing, but wrong. Too slow, too deep, like something massive drawing air through lungs the size of barrels. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed strangely, multiplying, returning to me from different directions. The breathing stopped. Silence. Then, a sound I'll never forget. A series of clicks, rapid and precise, like sonar. Like something was echolocating, building a picture of its surroundings through sound. Click, 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 click. Close. Very close. Right next to me. I stumbled backward, hands hitting the Honda's hood, pushing off, moving as fast as I could toward where I hoped the barrier was. My foot caught on something, maybe the cable, and I went down hard on the asphalt. The clicking intensified. I could feel it now, vibrations in my chest, in my skull, rhythmic and purposeful. Then I was through. Light flooded back. Temperature rose. I was on my hands and knees on the highway, the driver standing over me with a terrified expression. "Did you hear that?" I gasped. "Hear what?" The clicking." "I didn't hear anything. You just kind of disappeared into the dark. There was a loud thump, and then you came rolling out like something pushed you." I got to my feet, legs shaking. Looked back at the Honda, still sitting in that pool of shadow my headlights couldn't penetrate. The tow hook was attached. The cable was taut. "Get in your truck," I told the driver. We're pulling it out. Now." He didn't argue. He got in the passenger seat of my truck while I engaged the winch. The motor roared to life, cable going taut, pulling against whatever resistance was holding the Honda. For a moment, nothing happened. The cable was bar tight, the winch straining, but the Honda didn't move. Then, slowly, it started to slide. Inch by inch, foot by foot, the Honda was dragged backward out of that zone of darkness. As it crossed the barrier, my headlights suddenly illuminated it normally. The frost on the windows began to melt. The hazard lights, which had been dimly blinking, suddenly blazed bright. 20 feet from my truck, I stopped the winch. The Honda was fully in normal space now, sitting in the bright cone of my work lights. The driver got out, walked to his car, opened the door. The interior light came on. He reached in, turned the key. The engine started immediately. Perfect idle, no hesitation, like nothing had ever been wrong. "I don't understand," he said. "It was completely dead, and now it's fine?" I didn't have an answer for him. I unhooked the tow cable, coiled it back onto the winch, and tried to process what had just happened. "You should go," I said. "Get out of this area. Don't stop until you're at least 20 miles away." "What was that? What's wrong with this place?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's still here." He got in his Honda, put it in drive, and pulled back onto the highway. I watched his taillights disappear into the distance, moving fast, the car running smoothly. I should have left too, should have gotten in my truck and driven back to Rollins, and never thought about mile 118 again. But I needed to know. I repositioned my truck, pointing the headlights back at that section of highway where the Honda had been sitting. The beams reached normally now, illuminating asphalt and white lines and the shoulder beyond. No barrier, no darkness. Whatever had been there was gone. Or maybe it was just hiding. I grabbed my flashlight, tested it. Working normally. I walked to the exact spot where the Honda had been, where I'd crossed into that freezing darkness and heard the clicking. The air was normal temperature. My flashlight illuminated everything properly. The asphalt showed no unusual wear, no marks, no indication anything strange had happened. But when I knelt down and touched the road surface, it was cold. Not from the October air, cold like it had been exposed to something that drew all the heat out of it. And in the beam of my flashlight I could see them. Marks on the asphalt. Not tire tracks, not skid marks. Symbols. They were faint, almost invisible, unless you were looking for them. Geometric patterns, circles within circles, lines intersecting at precise angles. They covered an area about 20 feet in diameter, centered on where the Honda had been parked. I took photos with my phone, which had signal again now that I was past mile 118. Documented everything. The marks, the location, the temperature reading I took with my infrared thermometer that showed the asphalt was 38 degrees colder than the surrounding road surface. Then I got in my truck and drove. At mile 119, I looked in my rearview mirror. The area around mile 118 was dark, but not unusually so. Just normal highway darkness. At mile 120, I checked again. Still normal. At mile 121, I saw something that made me pull over. The darkness was back. A sphere of absolute shadow, sitting right where the Honda had been. It was growing, expanding slowly but steadily, consuming more of the highway. I watched for 5 minutes. The sphere grew from about 20 feet in diameter to almost 30. At that rate, it would cover the entire road within an hour. I called dispatch on my CB, which was working again. "This is Unit 19, Roadside Assistance. I need to report a road hazard on Route 287, mile 118. "What's the nature of the hazard?" How was I supposed to answer that? There's a sphere of darkness that eats light and makes clicking noises? Possible sinkhole or road surface failure. Recommend closure until dawn inspection. Copy that, Unit 19. We'll send a crew out at first light. But I knew they wouldn't find anything. By dawn, whatever was there would be gone. It would retreat, hide, wait for the next vehicle to break down in its territory. I drove home, uploaded my photos to my computer, and spent the rest of the night researching, trying to find any explanation for what I'd seen. I found reports, lots of them. Truckers reporting dead zones where their radios wouldn't work. Drivers whose vehicles mysteriously failed at specific mile markers, only to restart perfectly once towed away. Accounts of darkness that shouldn't exist, cold spots on warm nights, geometric patterns appearing and disappearing on highway surfaces. Mile 118 on Route 287 wasn't unique. It was one of dozens of locations across Wyoming where similar phenomena had been reported, and the reports were increasing. 2 days later, I got a call from Officer Vickers. She'd heard about my tow job from dispatch records, wanted to talk about what I'd experienced. We met at a diner in Rawlins. I showed her my photos, told her everything. The barrier that stopped light, the freezing cold, the clicking sounds, the symbols on the road. She showed me her files. Incident reports from 7 different highway patrol officers who'd experienced similar events at mile 118. Radio failures, time discrepancies, lights that behaved impossibly. It's not just mile 118, she said. There are at least 15 locations across the state with similar characteristics. Dead zones where normal physics doesn't apply, where something is happening that we can't explain. What do you think it is? I think something is studying us, examining our technology, our vehicles, maybe even us, setting up these zones to see how we react, how we navigate them, what we do when confronted with the impossible. Why? That's the question, isn't it? Why study us at all? Why these specific locations? Why highway mile markers instead of towns or cities? She pulled out a map of Wyoming. On it, she'd marked every location where unusual incidents had been reported. Mile 118 was one of 17 red dots scattered across the state. When connected, they formed a pattern. Not random, not accidental, a deliberate geometric arrangement that looked like a grid overlaid on the state's highway system. They're not random occurrences, she said. They're planned, systematic. Whatever's doing this has a purpose, and we're just starting to figure out what it is. I looked at the map, at those 17 red dots, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the diner's air conditioning. What happens when the pattern completes? I asked. Officer Vickers didn't answer, but the expression on her face told me she'd been asking herself the same question, and she didn't like any of the possible answers. 3 weeks after my initial encounter at mile 118, I got called back there. Another disabled vehicle, another driver requesting assistance. This time, dispatch sent both highway patrol and roadside assistance. This time, they sent me and Lyle. We arrived within minutes of each other at 3:47 a.m. The disabled vehicle was a white Ford F-150, pulled onto the shoulder at exactly mile 118.0, according to my GPS. The driver, a woman in her 50s, was standing on the shoulder about 50 feet from her truck, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "I'm not getting any closer," she said as soon as we approached. "There's something wrong with it." "What happened?" I asked. "I was driving along and my radio started acting up. Then my headlights started dimming. Then everything just died. I coasted to a stop here, tried to restart it. Nothing. So I got out and..." She trailed off, looking at her truck with an expression somewhere between fear and confusion. The closer I get to it, the harder it is to breathe. Lyle and I exchanged a glance. We'd compared notes after our individual experiences. We knew what this was. "Ma'am, I need you to stay here," I said. "We're going to assess the vehicle." Lyle already had his flashlight out, pointing it toward the F-150. The beam extended about 40 feet, then stopped. "It's bigger this time," he said quietly. He was right. During my encounter, the barrier had been subtle, barely noticeable. During his tow job, it had extended maybe 20 feet. Now, it looked like the zone of darkness encompassed at least 50 feet in diameter. It was growing. We approached together, moving slowly, watching for that moment when light stopped working properly. At 30 feet from the truck, Lyle's flashlight began to dim. At 40 feet, my radio started crackling with static. At 45 feet, we hit the barrier. The temperature dropped instantly. Our flashlights didn't go completely out this time, but they dimmed to barely functional, throwing weak yellow light that seemed to get absorbed by the air itself. The F-150 sat in shadow, frost forming on every surface. The driver's door was still open from when the woman had fled. Inside, I could see frost covering the dashboard, the steering wheel, the seats. "The symbols," Lyle said, pointing his flashlight at the ground. They were there, etched into the asphalt in patterns more complex than the ones he'd photographed before. Circles within circles, intersecting lines, geometric shapes that hurt to look at because they seemed to exist in more than 2 dimensions. And they were glowing. Not brightly, just a faint luminescence, like they were reflecting light that wasn't there. The glow pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "We need to document this," I said, reaching for my phone. It was dead. Battery had been at 70% when I entered the zone. Now it was completely drained. Lyle tried his phone. Same result. "Camera in my truck," he said. "If we can pull the vehicle out like last time, get it clear of the zone." That's when we heard it. The clicking. It started from somewhere above us, precise and rapid, bouncing off surfaces that shouldn't exist. Click, 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 click. Building a picture of us through echolocation. "It's here," Lyle whispered. "I don't see anything. Neither do I, but it's close." The clicking intensified, moved closer, circling us. I could feel it, a presence in the darkness, something massive and patient, studying us with inhuman curiosity. My training said to stand my ground, assess the threat, respond appropriately, but every instinct I had was screaming to run. "We need to leave," I said. "The truck, leave it. We need to go, now." We backed away slowly, keeping our dimmed flashlights pointed toward where we thought the clicking was coming from. The sound followed us, maintaining the same distance, like it was escorting us out. At the barrier, the clicking stopped. Light returned to normal. Temperature rose. Our phones powered back on spontaneously, batteries showing the same levels they'd had before entering the zone. The woman was waiting where we'd left her, eyes wide. "You heard it too. The clicking. You heard it the first time. It was in my truck. That's why I ran. It was in the cab with me making that sound, and I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Like something was touching me without actually touching me." I radioed dispatch. "Unit 12 requesting immediate backup at mile 118, route 287. We have a situation that requires additional units." "What kind of situation?" I looked at Lyle, at the woman, at the sphere of darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. "The kind that's above my pay grade." 3 more patrol cars arrived within the hour. By the time they did, the sun was starting to rise, the sky lightening from black to deep blue to pale orange, and the darkness around the F-150 was fading. Not retreating, just becoming less distinct. The hard edge of the barrier softened, the zone of shadow blending gradually with normal morning darkness. By the time full daylight arrived at 7:23 a.m., the zone was gone completely. The F-150 sat on the shoulder like any other disabled vehicle. No frost, no unusual cold, no symbols on the ground. The senior officer, a lieutenant named Matthews, examined the truck. Started it on the first try. All systems functioning normally. He couldn't find anything wrong with it. "Must have been a loose battery connection," he said. "Got jarred back into place when we moved it." Except nobody had moved it. The woman gave her statement, carefully editing out any mention of clicking sounds or darkness that ate light. She said her truck had died, she'd gotten out to call for help, and then it had spontaneously restarted. Mechanical failure, plain and simple. The other officers took notes, filed their reports, and cleared the scene. Another unexplained incident that would be attributed to equipment failure or driver error. But Matthews pulled me aside before he left. "I've been doing this for 23 years, he said. "And I've seen enough strange things on these highways to know when someone's not telling me the full story. So I'm going to ask you once, and I want an honest answer. What really happened here?" I looked at the spot where the F-150 had been, where those glowing symbols had pulsed in rhythm with something's invisible heartbeat. "I think something is marking territory," I said. "I think these zones, these dead spots where physics doesn't work right, they're not random. They're intentional. Something is claiming sections of highway, establishing boundaries, setting up observation posts. For what purpose? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's patient, it's methodical, and it's not done yet." Matthews was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Keep documenting every incident, every detail, no matter how small or strange. Because if you're right, we're going to need evidence, and we're going to need it soon." He drove away, leaving me and Lyle standing on the shoulder of Route 287 as traffic began to pick up with the morning commute. "What now?" Lyle asked. "Now we watch. We document. We try to figure out the pattern before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I pulled out the map Officer Vickers had shown me, the one with 17 red dots marking active zones. I added mile 118 to my own map, connecting the dots, looking for the pattern, and I saw it. The zones weren't just scattered randomly. They formed concentric circles, radiating out from a central point, and that central point was getting more active. If the pattern continued at its current rate, all 17 zones would connect by mid-December. They'd form a continuous network covering most of Wyoming's major highways. "Too late to leave," I said. "Once the network completes, I don't think we'll be able to get out." At 11:47 p.m. on December 15, 2021, every active zone in Wyoming activated simultaneously. I know because I was at mile 118 when it happened. Officer Vickers had assembled a team of witnesses, people who'd experienced the zones firsthand. Me, Lyle, 2 truck drivers, another highway patrol officer, and a geology professor from the University of Wyoming who'd been researching the geometric patterns we'd found. We were parked at a safe distance, about a quarter mile from mile 118, watching with night vision equipment and thermal cameras, documenting, recording, trying to gather evidence that couldn't be dismissed as equipment failure or mass hallucination. At 11:47, the zone activated. The darkness appeared first, expanding rapidly from a point on the highway until it encompassed the entire area we'd marked as the active zone. But this time, it didn't stop at 50 feet. It kept growing, 60 feet, 70, 100. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on our windshields. Our electronics flickered, dimmed, struggled to stay functional. Through the night vision we could see them, shapes moving in the darkness, tall, thin, humanoid, but wrong. They moved with a fluid grace that didn't match human biomechanics. There were dozens of them, maybe more, all engaged in some kind of coordinated activity. "What are they doing?" someone whispered. The professor had his laptop out, analyzing data from the thermal cameras. I don't know how to describe this. They're manipulating the road surface, changing its molecular structure. It's like they're programming the asphalt. The symbols appeared, glowing brighter than before. But they weren't just on the ground anymore. They extended upward, three-dimensional geometric constructs made of light, forming a lattice that hung suspended in the air. And then the zones connected. We felt it more than saw it. A vibration that ran through the ground, through our vehicles, through our bodies. Like the entire state had become one massive tuning fork struck by an invisible hand. Officer Vickers grabbed her radio. "All units, report status." Responses came in from officers stationed at other active zones across Wyoming. Mile 154 on I-80. Zone active and expanding. Route 191 near Boulder. Multiple contacts. Recommend immediate evac. Highway 789 south of Lander. We're experiencing complete electronic failure. All equipment non-functional. Mile 28 on Route 28. Visual confirmation of entities. Repeat. Visual confirmation. 17 zones. All active. All expanding. And all connected. The lattice of light spread from our location, extending toward the horizon in multiple directions. Within minutes, we could see other lattices in the distance, glowing geometries connecting zone to zone to zone. It was a network, a grid, covering the entire state. "We need to go," I said. "We need to get out of Wyoming before what? Before the grid completed? Before whatever this was finished its work?" We didn't get the chance. The entities moved toward us, flowing out of the darkness like water, surrounding our vehicles. Up close, I could see details. Elongated limbs with too many joints, heads that were the wrong shape, too narrow, crowned with structures that might have been sensory organs or communication arrays. And eyes, perfectly circular, perfectly black, reflecting nothing. One of them approached my patrol car, placed a long-fingered hand on the hood. The metal groaned, not from pressure, but from something else. Molecular change. Transformation. When it removed its hand, there was a symbol etched into the metal. The same symbol we'd seen on the road surfaces, glowing faintly in the darkness. It moved to each vehicle in turn, marking them. Marking us. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, they withdrew. The darkness receded. The lattices of light faded. The zones contracted back to their normal boundaries. By 12:15 a.m., it was over. We sat in stunned silence, engines running, heaters blasting, trying to process what we'd just witnessed. The professor was the first to speak. "They finished." "Finished what?" Officer Vickers asked. "The grid. It's complete. They've established a network that covers the entire state. Every major highway, every significant junction, all connected through these zones." "To what end?" He pointed at the symbol glowing on my patrol car's hood. "I think we're about to find out." Over the next 3 days, reports flooded in from across Wyoming. Hundreds of people experiencing strange phenomena. Time discrepancies. Electronic failures. Sightings of lights and shapes and things that shouldn't exist. But there was a pattern to the reports. They all originated from people who'd been near the zones. People who'd been marked, whether they knew it or not. People like us. I noticed it first on December 17th. I was driving to work, routine morning commute, when I saw something in my rearview mirror. A light, small and distant, following at a constant distance. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I exited the highway. it followed. I pulled into a parking lot. The light hovered at the entrance for a moment, then faded away. It was tracking me. Lyle reported the same thing. So did the other witnesses. We were being monitored, followed, studied even in our daily lives. The symbols on our vehicles wouldn't come off. We tried paint remover, acid, sandblasting. The marks remained, glowing faintly in darkness, visible only to those who knew to look for them. We'd been tagged, marked as subjects of interest in whatever experiment or study was being conducted. And we weren't the only ones. By early January, we'd identified over 300 people across Wyoming who'd been marked. All of them had experienced zone activity. All of them were being followed by lights. All of them reported the same thing. A feeling of being watched, constantly, by something patient and inhuman. Officer Vickers organized meetings, trying to coordinate a response. But what could we do? File reports that would be dismissed as mass hysteria? Go public with stories that would make us sound insane? We were trapped. Not physically, we could still leave Wyoming if we wanted. But the marks went with us. The lights followed. Leaving the state didn't mean escaping the observation. On January 15th, exactly 1 month after the grid activated, something changed. The lights stopped following us. All of us, simultaneously, we noticed the absence. No more glowing shapes in our mirrors. No more feeling of being watched. Just normal life, normal driving, normal existence. It should have been a relief. It wasn't. Because we realized what it meant. The observation phase was over. They had collected whatever data they needed. Learned whatever they wanted to learn about us, our vehicles, our highways, our behaviors. The study was complete. And now came the next phase. None of us knew what that would be. But on January 16th, I got a call from Lyle. He'd been driving through mile 118, daylight, normal traffic conditions. The zone was gone. Completely gone. No barrier, no darkness, no symbols on the road. Just normal highway. Indistinguishable from any other mile of Route 287. We checked the other zones. All of them empty, inactive. The grid had been dismantled as quickly as it had been established. Whatever they'd been building, they'd taken it apart and left. Or had they? The professor had a different theory. He thought the grid hadn't been dismantled. It had been internalized, absorbed into the landscape itself, becoming invisible but still present. Think of it like a computer network, he said. During installation, you can see all the wires, all the connections. But once it's up and running, you bury the cables, hide the hardware. The network is still there, still functional, but invisible to the casual observer. So, the zones are still active. I think they're dormant, waiting for activation. And when they do activate again, it won't be for observation. What will it be for? He didn't answer. But the expression on his face suggested he had theories, none of them comforting. It's been 3 months since the grid went dormant. Life in Wyoming has returned to normal, superficially. Traffic flows smoothly on Route 287. Mile 118 is just another mile marker. The zones are just stretches of highway like any other. But those of us who were marked, we know better. We feel it when we drive through the old zone locations. A subtle change in air pressure. A momentary chill. A sensation of being scanned by invisible eyes. The network is still there, and it's still watching. The symbols on our vehicles have faded, but not disappeared. Under certain lighting conditions, at certain times of night, they're still visible. Glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with something we can't see or hear. We are the marked ones. The studied subjects, the data points in an experiment we don't understand. And all we can do is wait. Wait for the grid to activate again, wait to find out what comes next. Wait to learn whether we were chosen for observation, or for something far worse. This document represents the consolidated accounts of 19 individuals who experienced direct contact with the Wyoming Highway Network, as we've come to call it. The zones, the grid, the entities, all of it. We've formed an informal monitoring group. We track incidents, share information, try to identify patterns, but the truth is we're flying blind. We have no idea what we're dealing with. What we do know, the zones are dormant but not gone. Electromagnetic readings at former active sites show anomalies that can't be explained by conventional science. The entities were real. We have footage, photographs, thermal imaging data. The evidence exists, even if no official agency will acknowledge it. The grid served a purpose. The geometric patterns, the symbols, the marking of specific individuals, it was all part of a systematic study. But study for what? To what end? That's the question that keeps us awake at night. Some theories. Resource assessment. They were cataloging Earth's infrastructure, identifying transportation networks, population movement patterns, preparing for something, biological research. We were the subjects. Our reactions to the zones providing data about human physiology, psychology, adaptability. Territorial marking. The zones represent claimed territory, boundaries established by an intelligence that views Earth as colonizable space. Communication network. The grid was a receiver or transmitter, connecting to something beyond our understanding, something that exists in dimensions we can't perceive. All of these theories have evidence supporting them. None of them are mutually exclusive. The most disturbing possibility is that all of them are true. That we were being studied, our territory marked, our infrastructure cataloged, all while a communication network was established between the zones and something elsewhere. If that's the case, then the grid going dormant isn't the end. It's the waiting period, the silence between observation and action. I still patrol Route 287. Still drive through mile 118 several times a week. Every time, I feel that momentary chill, that sense of passing through something invisible but present. Lyle still runs his tow service, still gets called out to disabled vehicles on lonely highways. He's learned to check for the signs, geometric patterns on the road, unusual cold spots, areas where light doesn't behave correctly. When he finds them, he documents everything and adds it to our database. We're up to 43 new potential zones. Most are dormant like the original 17, but 3 of them, identified in the past 2 weeks, show signs of activity. Low-level activity. Nothing like the full activation in December, but enough to suggest that whatever controls the network is still present, still watching, still waiting. For what? That's the question none of us can answer. But I have a feeling we won't have to wait much longer to find out. The symbols on my patrol car are glowing brighter. Lyle's tow truck the same. All 19 of us who were marked are reporting the same thing. The marks are intensifying. Like they're counting down, or warming up, or preparing to activate. I've started keeping a go bag in my car. Basic supplies, cash, documentation of everything we've learned. Just in case. Just in case the silence ends. Just in case the grid wakes up. Just in case the entities come back. And next time, they don't leave. If you're reading this, if you drive the highways of Wyoming or any other western state, pay attention to the road. Watch for the signs. Dead zones where your radio cuts out. Areas where your headlights don't illuminate properly. Geometric patterns on the pavement that seem to glow in darkness. If you see them, document them, share them. Help us build the map of what's really happening out here. Because the grid is spreading. We've confirmed a similar phenomena in Montana, Utah, Colorado, even as far as Nevada and Idaho. Whatever established the network in Wyoming is expanding its reach, and we're running out of time to figure out why. The silence at mile 118 continues, but it's not empty silence, it's the silence of something waiting, something patient, something that has all the time in the world, while we have none. I'm writing this from my patrol car, parked on the shoulder of Route 287, half a mile east of mile 118. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold my phone, but I need to document this while it's fresh, while I can still remember the details before my mind tries to rationalize them away. The grid just reactivated. Not all of it, just mile 118. But it was different this time, stronger, more purposeful. I was on routine patrol when I felt it. That's the only way I can describe it. I felt the activation before I saw it. A pressure in my chest, a sudden difficulty breathing, like the air had become thicker. My radio crackled once, twice, then went completely silent. I was at mile 115 when it happened, 3 miles away. During the December activation, I hadn't felt anything until I was within a quarter mile of the zone. But this time, the effect was reaching out farther, pulling at me from a distance. I should have turned around, should have called for backup, requested assistance, followed every protocol in the book. But I didn't, because the symbol on my hood was glowing so bright I could see it reflected in my windshield, pulsing in rhythm with something I couldn't hear. I drove toward it. Mile 116. The temperature started dropping. I watched my external thermometer fall from 32 degrees to 25, then to 18, then to single digits. Frost spread across my windshield from the edges inward, creating fractal patterns that looked almost identical to the symbols we'd documented. Mile 117. My headlights began to fail. Not dimming like Lyle had described, but flickering, strobing, creating a disorienting effect like watching the world through a broken film projector. In the spaces between light and darkness, I saw movement. Shapes crossing the road, tall and thin, moving with that impossible fluid grace. Then I hit mile 118 and everything stopped. The engine died. The lights went out. The world went absolutely, completely silent. I sat in total darkness, total quiet, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs. My breath came in short, rapid gasps that produced no sound. Even the blood rushing in my ears was muted, like someone had turned down the volume on my own body. Then the light came, not from above this time, from below. The pavement beneath my car began to glow, symbols emerging from the asphalt like they were being written in real time by an invisible hand. They spread outward in all directions, creating a mandala of geometric patterns that extended at least 100 feet in every direction. And they were different from the symbols we'd seen before. These were more complex, more layered. Three-dimensional structures that seemed to fold in on themselves, existing in spatial configurations that shouldn't be possible. Looking at them made my eyes hurt, made my head swim, because my brain couldn't process the geometry. The clicking started, but this time I could see where it was coming from. There were 6 of them, standing in a circle around my patrol car. Tall, impossibly thin, their dark forms barely distinguishable from the darkness around them except for their eyes. Those perfect circles of absolute black that somehow caught and held the light from the glowing symbols. They weren't moving, just standing there perfectly still, observing me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I tried to open my door. It wouldn't budge, not locked, just frozen, like the metal had fused with the frame. I tried to radio for help, forgetting that the radio was dead. My hand reached for the handset anyway. muscle memory overriding logic. That's when one of them moved. It approached the driver's side window, leaned down until its face was level with mine. Up close, I could see details I'd never noticed in our previous encounters. The skin, if you could call it that, had a texture like brushed metal. The head was elongated, the wrong proportions, crowned with 3 symmetrical protrusions that might have been sensory organs or communication devices or something else entirely. It placed one long-fingered hand on my window. I felt cold radiating through the glass, through the metal of the door, into my bones. Not the cold of winter, something else. The cold of deep space, of absolute zero, of entropy itself. And then I heard it, not through my ears, inside my head. A voice that wasn't a voice, communicating in a way that bypassed language, bypassed thought, went straight to some primal understanding center in my brain. The observation is complete. The data is sufficient. The marking has served its purpose. I wanted to ask what that meant. Wanted to demand answers, explanations, some kind of understanding of what had been done to us and why. But I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could only sit there while that entity stared at me with its impossible eyes. "You will remember this," it said. Not a statement, a command. "You will share this. You will warn the others." Warn them about what? I managed to think, putting every ounce of will into forming that question. The entity tilted its head, a gesture that might have been curiosity or amusement or something else entirely. "The grid is not for observation. The grid is infrastructure, foundation, preparation for what comes next." What comes next? But it was already moving away, rejoining the circle of its companions. The 6 of them stood in perfect formation, and the clicking intensified, became a rhythmic pattern that felt like it was trying to synchronize with my heartbeat. The symbols on the ground pulsed brighter, brighter, so bright I had to close my eyes against the glare. I felt my car shift, like it was being lifted, and my stomach lurched with the sensation of sudden movement. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was 4:17 a.m. 44 minutes had passed, but it had felt like less than 5. My car was still at mile 118, engine running, heater on, everything functioning normally. The entities were gone. The symbols were gone. The glowing mandala had vanished like it had never existed. But the mark on my hood was different now. It had changed. The original symbol was still there, but now there were additional marks surrounding it. A series of smaller symbols, forming what looked like a countdown or a sequence. 7 marks, evenly spaced, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. I took photos, documented everything I could see, then drove straight to Lyle's shop. He was already there, standing in the parking lot looking at his tow truck. His mark had changed too. Same pattern, 7 smaller symbols surrounding the original. We called the others. All 19 of us who had been marked during the December activation. Every single one reported the same thing. The marks had changed, new symbols had appeared, all showing the same pattern. 7 marks. The professor arrived within the hour, his laptop already running analysis programs. He photographed the symbols, ran them through pattern recognition software, compared them to every known writing system and mathematical notation. "They're not symbols," he said finally. "They're coordinates." "Coordinates to what?" "I don't know, but they're arranged in a specific sequence, and that sequence is—" He trailed off, his face going pale. "It's a countdown. These symbols represent intervals of time. How much time?" He showed us his calculations. The symbols, when decoded using the geometric patterns we'd documented over the past months, represented specific time intervals, and they were counting down. 7 intervals, each one approximately 30 days. We had 7 months. Until what? Lyle asked. The professor didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Until the grid activates fully. All zones simultaneously at maximum power. Whatever they've been building, whatever infrastructure they've been laying down, it goes live in 7 months. That was 3 days ago. Since then, we've been monitoring all 17 original zone locations, plus the 43 new potential sites we've identified. Every single one is showing increased activity. Low level, barely detectable, but consistent. The grid is warming up. Whatever comes next, whatever the entities meant when they said the observation was complete, we have 7 months to prepare. 7 months to warn people. 7 months to figure out if there's any way to stop what's coming. Or 7 months to accept that we're powerless against forces we don't understand, operating on timescales and for purposes beyond our comprehension. I'm still on patrol. Still driving Route 287. Still passing through Mile 118 multiple times a week. But now I'm counting down, watching the symbols on my hood, waiting to see if they change again, if the countdown accelerates or slows or somehow stops. The silence at Mile 118 continues. But now I understand what that silence means. It's not the absence of something. It's the quiet before activation. The held breath before the plunge, the last moment of calm before everything changes. We've tried to go public, tried to share what we know. But who would believe us? We have photos that could be faked, testimony that sounds like science fiction, experiences that defy every law of physics we understand. So we document, we monitor, we wait, and we watch the countdown, knowing that when it reaches 0, the grid will wake up. And then we'll finally learn what we've really been marked for. The entities said I would remember, that I would share this, that I would warn others. So consider this your warning. If you drive through Wyoming, if you pass through any of the marked zones, pay attention to your vehicle. Look for symbols that shouldn't be there. Feel for changes in temperature or air pressure. Watch for lights that follow you, for moments when time doesn't quite add up. Because the grid is real, the countdown has started. And when it reaches 0, everything we think we know about our place in the universe is going to change. I just hope we're ready. I don't think we will be. I've been flying for 12 years. Started with crop dusters in Nebraska, moved up to charter work, and for the past 3 years I've been running medical transports and emergency flights across Wyoming. I know these skies like most people know their daily commute. Every landmark, every radio tower, every stretch of highway visible from altitude. So when I saw the light, I knew immediately it was wrong. It was March 14th, 2022. I was flying a Cessna 208 Caravan from Rock Springs to Casper, carrying time-sensitive medical samples that needed to reach the hospital lab by 6 a.m. Routine flight, one I'd made probably 50 times. Departure at 3:47 a.m., estimated flight time 92 minutes. Clear weather, light winds, perfect conditions. I was at 10,000 feet cruising at 160 knots when I first noticed it. The light appeared on the horizon, slightly north of my flight path, at what looked like ground level. My first thought was a runway, maybe Rawlins or Jeffrey City's small airstrip, though neither should have been in that position relative to my heading. The light was white, steady, and bright. It looked exactly like a runway approach light, that distinctive high-intensity glow that marks the threshold of a landing strip. But it was solitary. No other lights around it, no pattern, no sequence. Just one light, perfectly still, sitting on the horizon. I checked my navigation. I was exactly where I should be, following my flight plan precisely. There were no airports in that direction. No towns large enough to have that kind of lighting. Nothing but empty land, dark and featureless. I radioed to Denver Center, the air traffic control facility handling my flight. Denver Center, Cessna November 73 Bravo. Charlie, requesting information on lighting approximately 15 miles north of my position, appears to be ground-based. Static crackled for a moment before the controller responded. November 73 Bravo. Charlie, Denver Center. We're not showing any reported lighting in that area. Can you describe what you're seeing? Single white light, high intensity, stationary. Resembles runway approach lighting, but isolated. Copy that. We'll check with local facilities. Continue on your current heading. I maintained course, but I kept watching the light. As I flew, it should have changed position relative to me, shifted across my field of view as I passed it. But it didn't. It stayed locked in the same position on the horizon, same bearing, same apparent distance. That's not how ground lights work. When you're moving at 160 knots, the landscape shifts continuously. Lights approach, pass, recede. They don't stay fixed like they're painted on the windscreen. I checked my instruments. Airspeed, altitude, heading, all normal. Fuel flow, engine temps, electrical systems, everything in the green. My GPS showed me tracking perfectly along my planned route, but the light wasn't moving. I decided to do a test. I banked slightly right, changing my heading by 10 degrees. If the light was on the ground, this maneuver should shift its relative position. It should move left in my field of view. It didn't. It stayed in exactly the same spot, as if it were locked to my aircraft rather than the ground below. My pulse quickened. 12 years of flying, thousands of hours in the air, and I'd never seen anything like this. Denver Center, November 73 Bravo. Charlie, the light is maintaining constant relative bearing. Attempting to identify. November 73 Bravo. Charlie, understand constant bearing. Are you requesting deviation to investigate? I thought about it. My cargo was time-sensitive. I had a strict delivery window. Deviating would add time, might cause me to miss my deadline. But I needed to know what this was. Affirmative, Denver Center. Requesting deviation to heading 320 for 5 miles, then direct to destination. November 73 Bravo. Charlie, cleared as requested. Advise when resuming course. I turned toward the light, pointing the nose directly at it. At 160 knots, 5 miles would take less than 2 minutes. I'd get close enough to identify it, then turn back to my original course. As I flew toward it, the light didn't get larger. It didn't get brighter. It stayed exactly the same size, the same intensity, like I wasn't getting any closer at all. 2 minutes passed. According to my GPS, I'd covered 5 miles. But the light looked identical. Same apparent distance, same brightness, same position. That's impossible. At my speed, I should have covered the distance. The light should be directly below me or past me by now. I looked at my altimeter, still 10,000 feet. Airspeed still 160 knots. But the ground speed reading on my GPS was wrong. It showed 0. I blinked, shook my head, looked again. The GPS display clearly showed my position updating, my track line extending, my coordinates changing. But the ground speed readout was frozen at 0.0 knots. Denver Center, November 73 Bravo. Charlie, I'm experiencing navigation equipment anomalies. GPS showing incorrect ground speed. No response. Denver Center, November 73 Bravo. Charlie, radio check. Static. Pure white noise, no voices, no other aircraft, no transmission at all. I tried my backup radio, same result. I tried my emergency frequency, nothing. Complete radio silence. I was alone in the sky, chasing a light that shouldn't exist, with instruments that had stopped making sense. Every instinct told me to turn around, resume my original course, get out of this situation. But I couldn't. The light held me, not physically, but psychologically. I needed to understand what it was. I descended to 8,000 feet. The light stayed at the same relative position. I descended to 6,000. No change. I dropped to 4,000 feet, low enough that I should be able to see terrain features distinguish the light's actual location. The light remained unchanged. And then I noticed something else. The stars were wrong. I fly at night regularly. I know the constellations, use them for backup navigation when I need to, but the stars around the light were arranged incorrectly. The patterns were distorted, stretched, like they were being pulled toward the light by some invisible force. I'd read about gravitational lensing, how massive objects bend light from stars behind them, but that requires something with planetary mass or greater. There was nothing in Wyoming with that kind of gravitational field, unless the light itself was the source. I leveled off at 4,000 feet and just watched. The light hung there, perfectly steady, surrounded by distorted starlight, existing in apparent defiance of physics and logic. And then I noticed the silence, not the absence of sound. The engine was still running. I could feel its vibration through the airframe, but a different kind of silence, a dampening of everything, like the world had been wrapped in cotton. Even my own breathing sounded muted, distant. I checked my oxygen levels, thinking maybe I was experiencing hypoxia. Normal, everything normal. But I didn't feel normal, I felt watched. It's a sensation every pilot knows, that instinctive awareness when another aircraft is nearby. Your peripheral vision catches movement. Your brain registers a change in the sky's empty pattern. But there was no movement here, just that light, and the growing certainty that something was observing me with intense focus. I tried to break away again, banking hard left, pushing the throttle forward. The aircraft responded. I felt the G-forces, saw the artificial horizon tilt, watched the heading indicator swing, but the light stayed locked in position, not following me, anchored to me, like it was tied to my aircraft by an invisible tether. "This isn't possible," I said aloud, needing to hear my own voice, needing to confirm I was still real and present. The light pulsed once. A single bright flash, like it was responding to my voice. My hands went cold. That was deliberate. That was communication. I thought about my cargo. Medical samples, time-sensitive biologicals that needed to reach Casper by 6 a.m. People were depending on me. Lives might depend on those samples. But how could I complete my mission when I couldn't even control my own aircraft's position? The fuel gauges drew my attention again. I'd been watching them periodically, standard practice on any flight. They showed I'd burned through 60 gallons. At my cruise speed and fuel consumption rate, that meant 90 minutes of flight time. But my chronometer showed only 37 minutes had passed since takeoff. I did the math in my head, checked it twice, arrived at the same impossible conclusion. According to my fuel, I should be arriving at Casper. According to the clock, I should still be halfway there. Time itself had become unreliable. Or worse, time had split into two different streams. One, measured by mechanical consumption of fuel, by the physical burning of hydrocarbons. Another, measured by electronic chronometers, by the ticking of quartz crystals. My body, I realized, felt like 90 minutes had passed. My back ached from sitting in the pilot's seat. My eyes felt strained from staring at instruments. My bladder was full, a physiological clock that couldn't be fooled. So, which time was real, the mechanical time or the electronic time? the biological time or the recorded time. Maybe they were all real. Maybe I was existing in multiple temporal streams simultaneously, experiencing time at different rates depending on the measuring system. The thought made my head hurt. I made a decision. I needed to land, needed to get out of the air, back to solid ground, away from whatever this was. I turned away from the light, setting a direct course for Casper's Natrona County International Airport. The moment I turned, the light vanished. Not faded, not dimmed, just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch. The stars snapped back to their proper positions. My radio crackled to life mid-transmission. Bravo, Charlie. Denver Center. We've lost radar contact. Please confirm your position. Denver Center, November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, I'm approximately 30 miles west of Casper, heading 090, 4,000 feet. November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, we show you just departing the Rock Springs area. Your transponder indicates departure time of 3 minutes ago. Negative, Denver Center. I departed Rock Springs 90 minutes ago. I've been in the air for over an hour. November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, our radar shows first contact with you 3 minutes ago. Prior to that, you were not on our scope. I looked at my instruments again. The chronometer now showed 4:54 a.m. If I'd departed at 3:47, that was 67 minutes. But Denver Center was saying they'd only been tracking me for 3 minutes. For 64 minutes, I'd been invisible to radar. For 64 minutes, I'd been flying through airspace that, according to air traffic control, didn't contain my aircraft. Denver Center, I need to land immediately. Requesting clearance for Natrona County. November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, cleared direct Natrona County. Contact Casper Tower on 118.3. I switched frequencies, contacted Casper Tower, received landing clearance. The approach and landing were routine, mechanical, automatic. My hands worked the controls, my eyes scanned the instruments, but my mind was somewhere else, trying to process what had happened. I touched down at 5:11 a.m., taxied to the general aviation ramp, shut down the engine. Sat in the silence, hands still gripping the yoke, trying to slow my breathing. The medical samples needed to be delivered. I had a job to do. I gathered the insulated container, filled out the paperwork, and headed to the terminal. That's when I met Cole Braddock. He was standing outside the terminal, looking north, his face pale in the pre-dawn light. "You saw it too," he said. Not a question. I stopped. Saw what? The light, the one that doesn't cast shadows. I worked the overnight shift at Natrona County International. Refueling, towing aircraft, general maintenance, whatever needs doing between midnight and 8 a.m. It's quiet work, usually just me and 1 or 2 other guys, handling the occasional charter or cargo flight. March 14th started normal. I came in at midnight, did my equipment checks, topped off 2 aircraft that were scheduled for early morning departures. By 3 a.m., things had settled into the usual overnight lull. No traffic expected until around 5:30. I was in the maintenance hangar, working on a tow bar that had developed a hydraulic leak when I first noticed the light. It appeared in the northern sky just above the horizon, bright white and perfectly steady. My first thought was an aircraft on approach. But the light wasn't moving. It just sat there, motionless, far brighter than any navigation light should be. I walked outside for a better view, away from the hangar's fluorescent lights. The light was still there, unchanged. I checked my watch, 3:51 a.m. I've worked at airports for 9 years, started in Colorado Springs, moved here 3 years ago. I know aircraft lights, know their patterns, know how they move and behave. This was wrong. It was too bright for a navigation light, too steady for a strobe, and it wasn't moving at all. Even an aircraft in a holding pattern shows some movement, some variation in position. This was locked in place like it was bolted to the sky. I grabbed the binoculars we keep in the operations shack, focused on the light. Through magnification, it looked even stranger. The light wasn't spherical. It was elongated, slightly oval, and it had a quality I'd never seen before. It looked solid. Not like a source emitting light, but like light itself had become a physical object. And there was something else. I was standing under one of the ramp's LED floodlights, a 500-watt unit that casts a harsh white glow across the concrete. Every object under that light creates a shadow. Tools, equipment, aircraft, people, everything. But the light in the sky cast no shadow. I moved around, changing my position relative to the floodlight and the distant light. No matter where I stood, no shadow appeared. It was like the light wasn't really there, wasn't physically present in a way that could block or affect other light. I called the tower. "Tower, this is ground ops. Are you showing any traffic to the north, approximately 10 miles out?" The controller's voice came back immediately. "Ground ops, negative. We have no traffic on approach, no known aircraft in that sector. I've got a visual on a bright light, stationary, bearing approximately 350. Can you confirm?" There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clicks over the radio. "Ground ops, we're not showing anything on radar in that direction. Can you describe the light?" "White, high intensity, non-moving. Doesn't match any aircraft lighting I'm familiar with." "Copy that. We'll monitor. Let us know if it changes." I kept watching. The light stayed exactly where it was, bright and inexplicable. I decided to do a practical test. I grabbed a clipboard and held it up between me and the light, creating a deliberate obstruction. When I looked at the ground behind the clipboard, I could see my shadow cast by the ramp's floodlight. Sharp, well-defined, exactly where it should be. But when I moved the clipboard so the light was directly behind it, something impossible happened. I could still see the illumination from the light on the ground around me. It wasn't blocked by the clipboard. The light was somehow passing through a solid object, or going around it, or, and this thought made my skin crawl, existing in a way that didn't interact with normal matter. I lowered the clipboard, feeling a creeping sense of wrongness. 9 years of working around aircraft, around lights and physics and the predictable behavior of the physical world, and I'd never seen anything like this. I walked to the edge of the ramp, where the concrete met scrubland, picked up a rock about the size of my fist, held it up toward the light. The rock cast a shadow from the floodlight behind me, but when I positioned it directly between me and the mysterious light, no shadow appeared on the ground. I threw the rock into the air, a high arc that carried it up about 30 feet. As it reached the apex and began to fall, the light from the north should have cast its shadow on the ground. But there was nothing. The rock tumbled through illuminated air without creating any darkness. This violated everything I understood about light and shadow. Photons travel in straight lines. Objects block photons. Blocked photons create shadows. This was fundamental physics, the kind of thing you learn as a child. But this light didn't follow those rules. I pulled out my phone, tried to take a photo. The camera couldn't focus on it. The autofocus system kept hunting, searching for something to lock onto, but it couldn't find the light, like the camera couldn't see it even though my eyes could. I tried manual focus, adjusting until the surrounding landscape was sharp. The light appeared on the screen, but it looked different. It wasn't as bright, and it had a strange quality, like it was bleeding through from another layer of reality. The thought occurred to me that maybe it was. Maybe this light existed in some other dimension or frequency that my eyes could perceive but cameras and shadows couldn't interact with. Or maybe it was generating its own localized field where the normal rules of optics simply didn't apply. Either possibility was terrifying. I checked my watch, 4:03 a.m. 12 minutes I'd been observing this thing. 12 minutes of my life I'd never get back. Spent staring at something that shouldn't exist. At 4:03 a.m., I received a call from operations. Cole, we've got an inbound charter, November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, medical transport from Rock Springs, ETA approximately 40 minutes. Copy that. I'll have refueling standing by. I went back to work, but I kept glancing at the light. It was still there, unchanged, unmoving. At 4:17 a.m., something changed. The light began to pulse. Not quickly, just a slow, rhythmic variation in intensity. Bright, dimmer, bright, dimmer. The cycle took about 4 seconds, regular as a heartbeat. I called the tower again. Tower, ground ops, the light is now pulsing. Recommend we issue a notice to airmen. Ground ops, we're still not picking anything up on radar. No transponder, no primary return, nothing. Are you certain you're seeing something? I'm looking right at it. White light, bearing 350 pulsing every 4 seconds. Another pause. Stand by. I stood there, watching the light pulse, wondering what the hell I was looking at. A drone? Too bright, too high, a weather balloon? Wrong time of day, wrong behavior. A satellite? They don't hover, don't pulse like this. The tower came back. Ground ops, we're calling Denver Center. See if they have any information. Continue to monitor. Will do. At 4:23 a.m., the light stopped pulsing. Just froze at full brightness, steady again. And then it started moving. Not across the sky, but closer. It was getting bigger, increasing in apparent size, which meant it was approaching the airport. I grabbed my radio. Tower, ground ops. The light is now approaching. Estimate distance less than 5 miles. Ground ops. We still have nothing on radar. Can you estimate altitude? I tried to judge the angle, estimate the height. Hard to say. If it's 5 miles out, I'd guess 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Copy that. We're contacting Denver Center now. The light continued to approach. 3 miles, 2 miles, close enough now that I could see it more clearly with the naked eye. It was larger than I'd thought, maybe 20 feet across, and it was definitely oval-shaped. The edges were perfectly defined, sharp, like someone had cut an ellipse out of the night sky and replaced it with pure white radiance. 1 mile, half a mile. It stopped directly north of the airport, hovering at what looked like about 5,000 feet. And that's when I noticed the most disturbing thing. The light was casting illumination downward. I could see the ground beneath it, the scrubland and highway illuminated by its glow. But the objects on the ground, the rocks, the sage bushes, the fence posts, none of them were casting shadows. Light without shadow. Illumination without darkness, like the fundamental laws of optics had stopped applying. I was about to call the tower again when I heard an aircraft engine. I looked up and saw navigation lights approaching from the west. The charter flight, November 7-3 Bravo Charlie. The Cessna was on approach, descending toward the airport, flying directly toward the hovering light. I keyed my radio. Tower, ground ops. We have inbound traffic converging with the anomalous light. Ground ops. The pilot reports no visual on any unusual traffic. We're going to bring her in. I watched, helpless, as the Cessna flew closer to the light. The pilot had to see it. It was right there, bright enough to illuminate the ground, impossible to miss. But the aircraft didn't deviate, didn't change course, just continued on its approach path like the light didn't exist. And then the Cessna flew through it. For exactly 3 seconds, the aircraft was inside the light. I could see the silhouette of the plane, dark against the white radiance, suspended in that impossible glow. Then it was through, continuing its descent, lining up with the runway. The light remained where it was for another moment, then began to fade. Not shrinking, not moving away, just fading like someone was turning down a dimmer switch. By the time the Cessna touched down at 5:11 a.m., the light was gone. I ran to the ramp, arriving just as the pilot shut down the engine. She climbed out, a woman probably mid-30s looking shaken. "You saw it too," I said. She looked at me, and I could see recognition in her eyes. "The light, the one that doesn't cast shadows." We stood on the ramp in the pre-dawn cold, two strangers who'd witnessed the same impossible thing from different perspectives. She from the air, me from the ground. Both of us seeing something that shouldn't exist. "From the ground," I said, "it looked like you flew right through it." Sandra's face went pale. "I was chasing it, tried to get close enough to identify it, but it stayed at the same distance no matter how fast I flew or how far I went. It was here," I told her, "right over the airport, maybe 5,000 feet up. You had to have seen it on your approach." "I didn't see anything on approach. The light disappeared when I turned away from it. About 30 miles west of here, it was just gone." I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos I'd managed to capture. "Look at these. The light shows up, but it's distorted, like the camera can't quite process what it's seeing." She zoomed in on one of the images, her pilot's eye catching details I'd missed. "The edges aren't clean. Normal lights have crisp boundaries, but this, it's like it's fuzzing out into the surrounding air, like it's not fully present in our physical space." "There's more," I said. "Watch this." I showed her the video I'd taken, a 30-second clip of me throwing the rock up into the illuminated air. "See? No shadow. The light hits the rock, but no shadow forms. I tried it with a clipboard too. Same result." She watched the video 3 times, her expression shifting from skepticism to confusion to something that looked like fear. "That's not possible. Light doesn't work that way." "I know. I mean, even if it was some kind of exotic radiation, gamma rays, X-rays, whatever, there would still be interaction with matter. There would still be blocking, scattering, some kind of effect. But this..." She gestured at the screen. "This is like the light exists in a different phase of reality, like it's here, but not here." We compared notes, piecing together the timeline. She'd first seen the light at approximately 4:05 a.m. from her position west of Casper. I'd first seen it at 3:51 a.m. from the ground. We'd both been watching the same light, but from her perspective it was on the horizon, motionless. From mine, it was overhead, approaching. "Wait," Sandra said, pulling out her flight log. "You saw it at 3:51 a.m.? "Yes, I checked my watch specifically. But I saw it at 4:05. That's a 14-minute difference. If we were both watching the same light, then it appeared at different times for different observers," I finished. "Or appeared at the same time, but time was running at different rates for us." She ran her hand through her hair, a gesture of frustration I was beginning to recognize. "None of this makes sense. Time doesn't flow at different rates for people at different locations, not unless there's significant gravitational differential or relativistic speeds involved." "What if there was?" I asked. "What if the light was generating its own localized time field? A bubble where time runs differently than the surrounding space? That would require technology far beyond anything we have. Energy requirements would be astronomical. But not impossible." She hesitated. "Not theoretically impossible, but practically. We're talking about manipulating space-time itself. That's science fiction territory." "So is a light that doesn't cast shadows," I pointed out. She couldn't argue with that. We walked to her Cessna, and she powered up the avionics to access the flight data. I watched over her shoulder as she navigated through the menus, pulling up her last flight record. The display showed her last flight. Departure, 0347. Arrival, 0347. Flight time, 0.0 hours. Distance, 0.10 nautical miles. She stared at the screen, her hand frozen on the control panel. I don't understand. I flew. I was in the air. I used fuel. I covered distance. I experienced time passing. Check your fuel gauges, I said. She looked at the fuel indicators. They showed tanks at 3/4 full. She pulled out her flight plan, did quick calculations on a notepad she kept in the cockpit. Based on my departure fuel load and current level, I burned 61 gallons. At my cruise consumption rate, that's... She paused, double-checking her math. That's 93 minutes of flight time. But the recorder shows 0. The recorder is wrong. Is it, or is it recording a different kind of time than your fuel consumption? I showed her my phone again, the timestamp on my photos. Look, every photo I took of the light shows the exact same time. 3:51 a.m. I watched that light for over 20 minutes, took dozens of photos, but according to my phone, no time passed. Sandra sat down heavily on the Cessna's wing step. We lost time, both of us. Somehow, we experienced events that took time to unfold, but that time wasn't recorded. It didn't register on any device. Not lost time, I corrected. Unrecorded time. It happened, we remember it. We have physical evidence. Your burned fuel, my observations. But it left no trace on electronic systems. She sat down on the ramp, her back against the Cessna's landing gear. What the hell is going on? I didn't have an answer, but I knew someone who might. There's a woman, I said. Highway patrol officer. She's been documenting strange phenomena across Wyoming. Lights, time discrepancies, equipment failures. She might have some context for this. Can you contact her? I can try. I pulled up Officer Vickers' number, the one she'd given me when I'd reported some weird lighting I'd seen on a drive to Laramie 6 months ago. The call went to voicemail. Officer Vickers, this is Cole Braddock. We spoke last year about the lights on Route 287. I need to talk to you. Something happened at Natrona County Airport tonight that I think you'll want to know about. Please call me back. Sandra stood up, looked at the northern sky where the light had been. It's coming back, isn't it? Whatever this is, it's not done. What makes you say that? Because I felt it. When I was chasing the light, there was this moment when I felt like it was analyzing me, studying me, like I was a specimen under a microscope, and it decided I was interesting, worth watching. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning cold. I felt the same thing, like it was aware of me, like it knew I was watching it. We stood there in silence, watching the sky lighten with approaching dawn. By 5:45 a.m., the sun was beginning to rise, washing out the stars, erasing the darkness. And with the darkness went any evidence that the light had ever existed. The tower called me. Ground Ops, Denver Center wants a statement about the reported anomalous light. Can you come to the tower? On my way. Sandra came with me. We gave our statements to the controller, who typed them up with an expression that suggested he thought we were both crazy, but was too professional to say so. Denver Center is classifying this as possible meteor activity, he said. Unless you have physical evidence or radar confirmation, that's how it'll be logged. Meteor activity doesn't hover, Sandra said. It doesn't pulse. It doesn't maintain position for over 20 minutes. I'm just telling you what they said. We left the tower, frustrated but not surprised. I'd worked around aviation and airports long enough to know that anything unexplained gets classified as something conventional, no matter how poorly the explanation fits the facts. Sandra needed to deliver her medical samples to the hospital. I needed to finish my shift. We exchanged contact information, promised to share any new information we discovered. "If it comes back," she said, "call me. I want to be here. You want to see it again? I want to understand it. I've spent my whole life believing that the sky was a place governed by predictable laws. Physics, aerodynamics, navigation, all of it made sense. But that light? It broke every rule, and I need to know why." She drove away in her truck, and I went back to work. But I couldn't focus. Every few minutes, I'd look north, scanning the sky for any sign of the light. It didn't appear that morning, or the next day, or the day after that. But 3 weeks later, it came back. The light reappeared at 3:51 a.m. on April 5th, exactly the same time it had appeared the first time. Same location, same bearing, same altitude. This time, I was ready. I'd set up a camera on a tripod, pointed north, configured to take a photo every 30 seconds. I had a voice recorder running, documenting everything I observed in real time. I'd contacted Sandra, and she was in the air, flying a holding pattern west of the airport, waiting. The light appeared as before. White, steady, bright. I started my observations. 3:51 a.m. Light appears bearing 350, estimated 5,000 feet. No radar contact confirmed by tower. Beginning photographic documentation. I watched through binoculars as the light began its pulsing pattern. 4 seconds bright, 4 seconds dimmer, regular as clockwork. Sandra's voice came over the radio calling the tower. "Casper Tower, November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, I have visual on the anomalous light, bearing 015 from my position, requesting permission to investigate. November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, be advised we have no traffic in that sector. Proceed with caution." I watched Sandra's navigation lights bank towards the north, heading towards the light. She was at 8,000 feet descending to 6,000, positioning herself for a close pass. The light stopped pulsing, held steady at full brightness, like it was aware of her approach. Sandra's voice, "Tower, November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, closing on the light. Distance approximately 2 miles. Then her voice changed, became strained. "Tower, I'm experiencing navigation anomalies. GPS showing inconsistent data. Airspeed and ground speed diverging. November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, confirm you're maintaining safe flight parameters." "Affirmative, Tower. But my instruments are..." "Wait, the light is moving. It's approaching me." I watched from the ground as the light began to shift position, moving toward Sandra's aircraft. The 2 points of light, hers and the anomaly, converged. "Tower, it's right in front of me. Distance less than 100 feet. It's..." Her transmission cut off. Just dead air. "November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, Casper Tower. Respond." Nothing. "November 7-3 Bravo. Charlie, you are not transmitting. Please respond." I grabbed my radio. "Tower, ground ops, do you still have her on radar?" "Ground ops, negative. We've lost all contact. No transponder, no radio, no radar return." The light in the sky began to move again, but this time it was different. It was growing, expanding, becoming larger and brighter, and I could see something inside it. Sandra's aircraft. The Cessna was visible as a dark silhouette against the white radiance, suspended motionless inside the light. Not flying, not falling, just hanging there like a model in a display case. I grabbed my camera, zoomed in as far as the lens would go. Through the viewfinder, I could see the aircraft clearly. The propeller was stopped. The wings were level. The aircraft looked like it had been frozen mid-flight. For 93 seconds, the Cessna hung there inside the light. I counted every second, my voice recorder capturing the timestamp. Then the light released it. The aircraft dropped out of the light like it had been unplugged from whatever force was holding it. It fell about 50 feet, then the propeller started turning again. The engine roared back to life, and Sandra pulled out of the dive. Tower, November 7, 3 Bravo. Charlie, I'm okay. Returning to the airport. November 7, 3 Bravo. Charlie, confirm you're in controlled flight. Affirmative. All systems normal. I'm coming in. The light faded, just like before. Not moving away, just fading from existence. By the time Sandra landed 12 minutes later, it was completely gone. She climbed out of the cockpit, her hands shaking, her face pale. It took me. I saw it. You were inside the light for 93 seconds. It felt like longer. It felt like hours. She sat on the ramp, trying to compose herself. When I was inside, I couldn't move. Couldn't touch the controls, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. Everything just stopped. But I was still conscious, still aware, and I could feel it examining me. Examining how? Like it was scanning me, reading me, learning everything about me. How I think, how I react, what I fear, what I hope for. It was invasive, violating, but not hostile, just curious. I showed her the photos I'd captured. The image of her aircraft suspended in the light was clear, undeniable. This was physical evidence, something that couldn't be dismissed as misidentification or equipment failure. We need to go public with this, she said. We need to show people what's happening. We will, but first, we need to understand the pattern. I pulled out a map of Wyoming that I'd been marking up over the past 3 weeks. I'd contacted Officer Vickers, shared our experiences, and she'd given me access to her database of reported phenomena. I'd been correlating the data, looking for connections. Look at this, I said, spreading the map on the hood of her truck. Every reported incident of unusual lights, time discrepancies, electronic failures, all of them plotted on a map. The marks formed a pattern. Not random, not scattered, but organized in a grid that covered most of the state. And look at this, I said, pointing to Natrona County Airport. We're at a junction point. 3 major highways converge near here. The airport sits at the center of a triangle formed by I-25, Route 220, and Route 2026. So every junction point in the grid has experienced incidents. Highway intersections, airport locations, anywhere multiple transportation routes converge. Sandra studied the map. They're not random encounters, they're systematic. Like someone is studying our transportation infrastructure. Not just studying, mapping. Every incident involves navigation equipment failures, time discrepancies, GPS anomalies. Like whatever is doing this is trying to understand how we navigate, how we move through space and time. For what purpose? I didn't have an answer. But Officer Vickers did. She arrived at the airport at 7:30 a.m., 2 hours after Sandra's encounter with the light. She brought files, reports, photographs, evidence accumulated over years of investigation. You're not the first pilot to encounter this, she said, spreading documents across a table in the airport's conference room. Over the past 5 years, I've documented 17 incidents involving aircraft. Small planes, helicopters, 1 commercial flight that had to divert due to unexplained navigation failures. She showed us a report from 2019. A medical helicopter had encountered a bright light while transporting a patient from Gillette to Casper. The helicopter's GPS failed, their radio went silent, and they lost 11 minutes of recorded time. The pilot described the light as solid, like a physical object made of radiance. "Sound familiar?" Vickers asked. Sandra nodded. "That's exactly what I saw." Here's another one. A charter pilot in 2020 reported seeing a stationary light while flying from Cheyenne to Cody. When he tried to investigate, his aircraft's instruments froze. His chronometer stopped. When they started working again, he was 15 miles off course with no memory of how he got there. And this one. A commercial pilot in 2021 reported a close encounter with an intensely bright elliptical light while approaching Jackson Hole Airport. His aircraft passed through the light, and for the duration of the passage, all electrical systems failed. Engines kept running, but nothing else worked. No lights, no radios, no instruments. "They're all the same," Sandra said. "The same type of light, the same effects, the same time anomalies. And they're increasing in frequency," Vickers said. "In 2019, I had 3 reports. In 7. In 2021, 12. So far in 2022, we've had 8, and it's only April." "They're ramping up," I said. "Increasing their observation, expanding their study." "But why?" Sandra asked. "What are they trying to learn?" Vickers pulled out one more document. This one, a complex chart showing correlation between reported incidents and transportation infrastructure. "I think they're building a model, a complete understanding of how we move across the landscape. Every highway, every airport, every route we use. They're mapping not just the physical infrastructure, but how we use it. Times of day, traffic patterns, flight paths, everything. To what end? I don't know. But whatever it is, it requires a complete understanding of our transportation systems, and they're almost done collecting data." She pointed to her chart. "Based on the rate of increase and the geographic distribution of incidents, I estimate they'll have complete coverage of Wyoming's transportation network within 6 months. After that what? After that, they either move on to study another area, or they stop being observers and become something else." We sat in silence, processing the implications. Somewhere above Wyoming, something was watching us, studying us, building a comprehensive model of how we moved across the land and through the air. And we had no idea what they planned to do with that information. Sandra broke the silence. "We need to document everything. Every encounter, every anomaly, every data point. Build our own model of their behavior, try to predict when and where they'll appear next." "I'm already doing that," Vickers said. "But I need help. More observers, more data points, more people willing to report what they see without fear of being dismissed as crazy." "I can organize the pilots," Sandra said. "Charter operators, medical transports, anyone who flies regular routes across the state. We can create a reporting network. And I'll coordinate with ground crews," I said. "Airport personnel, highway maintenance, truck drivers, anyone who's out at night watching the roads and skies." Vickers nodded. "Good. Because whatever's coming, we need to be ready for it." Over the next 2 months, we built our network. 43 pilots agreed to participate, along with 67 ground personnel, airport workers, police officers, maintenance crews, truckers. All of them had experienced something strange, something unexplainable, and all of them wanted answers. The reports came in steadily. Lights over I-80 near Rock Springs. Navigation failures approaching Sheridan County Airport. Time discrepancies on Route 287 near Muddy Gap. Electronic anomalies at the junction of Route 789 and Route 28. We plotted every incident, analyzed every pattern. looked for the underlying structure, and we found it. The grid was almost complete. Every major transportation corridor in Wyoming had been studied. Every airport had experienced at least one incident. The model was comprehensive, detailed, systematic. On June 14, 2022, at exactly 3:51 a.m., every active observation point activated simultaneously. Lights appeared over 17 airports, 32 highway junctions, and 41 isolated sections of rural road, all at once, all following the same pattern: appear, pulse, observe, fade. But this time, something was different. The lights didn't fade after their usual observation period. They stayed, and they began to connect. I watched from Natrona County Airport as the light appeared in its usual position to the north. But then I saw others. Lights to the east, to the south, to the west. 4 lights, positioned at the corners of a square centered on the airport. And between them, barely visible against the night sky, I could see lines of light. Thin, geometric, precise, connecting the points. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath, watch it crystallize in the air. The phenomenon was localized. 20 feet away, near the terminal building, the maintenance crew was working in shirt sleeves. But here, where I stood watching the lights, it felt like winter. My radio crackled with reports from across the state. Every observer in our network was seeing the same thing. Lights appearing in coordinated positions, connecting into geometric patterns, creating structures that spanned miles. I called Sandra, who was in the air, observing from altitude. "Are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it." "Cole, they're building something. A structure made of light." Through my binoculars, I could see the lines more clearly now. They weren't simple beams connecting point to point. They were complex, layered, like strands of fiber optic cable carrying information at impossible speeds. Pulses of light traveled along the lines, moving in patterns that suggested communication or data transfer. "It's a coordinate system," Sandra said, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and awe. "They're establishing reference points, creating a navigation grid. For what? I don't know, but whatever it is, it's big." I set up my camera on the tripod, started recording. This was evidence that couldn't be denied, couldn't be dismissed as equipment malfunction or observer error. This was real, physical, undeniable. The lattice continued to expand, growing more complex, more intricate. And at every junction point, at every intersection of light, the air seemed to shimmer and distort, like reality was bending around these geometric constructs. I could feel it now, a pressure in my chest similar to what I'd experienced during previous encounters, but magnified 100-fold. It felt like the atmosphere itself was being compressed, folded, manipulated into new configurations. My instruments were going haywire. The electromagnetic field detector I'd borrowed from a university physics department was pegged at maximum. The radiation counter was clicking steadily, detecting something that wasn't quite gamma rays, wasn't quite X-rays, something the device couldn't properly categorize. Through my radio, I could hear Sandra's breathing, fast and shallow. "Cole, I'm at 15,000 feet, and I can see the whole grid. It covers the entire southern half of Wyoming, from Cheyenne to Rock Springs, from the Colorado border up to Casper. The whole thing is connected." "How many points?" "I count at least 60 primary nodes, maybe more. And each node is connected to 4 or 5 others. It's like a neural network, but made of light and spanning hundreds of miles." I zoomed in with my camera, focusing on the nearest junction point. The intersection was beautiful and terrifying, light meeting light in impossible angles, creating 3-dimensional structures that my 2-dimensional mind struggled to comprehend. And then I saw movement within the structures, not the movement of the light itself, but something traveling along the lines. Dark shapes, flowing like liquid through the luminous network, moving from node to node with purpose and direction. Sandra, are you seeing the dark shapes? Yes, I'm seeing them. They're moving through the grid like blood through veins. That was exactly what it looked like. The grid was alive, and these dark shapes were its lifeblood, carrying something, information, energy, maybe even matter, across impossible distances in impossible ways. The display lasted for 17 minutes. I timed it precisely, watching my chronometer count each second, making sure this time would be recorded, would be documented, would leave undeniable proof. At minute 14, the dark shapes began to congregate. They moved toward specific junction points, gathering in clusters that pulsed with increasing intensity. At minute 16, the pulsing synchronized. Every cluster, every junction, every line of light began to pulse in perfect unison. The entire grid became one massive, coordinated system, beating like a single enormous heart. At minute 17, it collapsed. All the lights went out simultaneously. Not fading, not dimming, just instantaneously gone. The lattice disappeared. The dark shapes vanished. The temperature normalized. The pressure in my chest released so suddenly I gasped. The night sky returned to normal. But we knew it wasn't really gone. The grid had been established. The framework was in place. Whatever they'd been preparing for, the preparation was complete. Now we wait. Wait to see what comes next. Wait to learn what purpose all this observation has served. Wait to discover whether we're dealing with simple scientific curiosity or something far more concerning. The lights still appear occasionally. Single incidents, isolated observations, like maintenance checks on a completed system. But the large-scale activations have stopped. The study is complete, the grid is operational, and we have no idea what it's for, but we're watching, documenting, preparing, because whatever happens next, at least we won't face it blind. We'll see it coming, even if we don't understand it, even if we can't stop it. We'll see it, and maybe that's enough, but I don't think it is. 3 days after the grid activation, Sandra and I met with Officer Vickers and the university professor who'd been helping analyze the geometric patterns. We spread out all our evidence across a conference table. Photos, videos, instrument readings, witness testimonies from 63 different observers across the state. The professor, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, studied the data with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent decades in scientific research. She was in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, glasses perched on her nose as she examined photo after photo. "This is unprecedented," she said finally. "In 30 years of studying atmospheric phenomena, I've never seen anything remotely like this. The geometric precision alone suggests intelligence, planning, purpose, but the scale..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "What do you think it means?" Sandra asked. Dr. Morrison pulled up a map on her laptop, overlaying our documented sightings with Wyoming's transportation infrastructure. "Look at this. Every single node in the grid corresponds to a major transportation hub or corridor. Airports, highway interchanges, railway junctions. They've mapped our entire transportation network." "We knew that already," Vickers said. "The question is why?" "I have a hypothesis," Dr. Morrison said, "but you're not going to like it." We waited. What if they're not mapping our transportation system to understand it? What if they're mapping it to use it? The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. "Use it how?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Our highways, our railways, our flight paths. They're all optimized for moving people and goods efficiently across the landscape. We've spent decades, centuries even, refining these routes. identifying the best paths, the most efficient connections. What if that's exactly what they need? A ready-made infrastructure for whatever they're planning. Sandra stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the tarmac where her Cessna was parked. You're saying they're going to use our roads, our airports, our navigation systems? I'm saying that's one possibility. They've studied how we move across the land and through the air with incredible detail. They know our patterns, our schedules, our routes. They've built a grid that maps perfectly onto our transportation network. That's not random, that's preparation. Preparation for what? Vickers asked the question we were all thinking. Dr. Morrison pulled up another image. This one showing the dark shapes we'd observed moving through the grid during the activation. These entities, whatever they are, were traveling through the grid at speeds we couldn't even measure, moving from point to point instantaneously, or near instantaneously. If they can do that... She paused, choosing her words carefully. If they can move through their grid the way data moves through fiber optic cables, then distance becomes meaningless. They could be anywhere, everywhere, all at once. I thought about what I'd seen that night. The synchronized pulsing, the dark shapes congregating at junction points, the feeling of watching something enormous and coordinated unfold across hundreds of miles. It's not just Wyoming, is it? I said. Dr. Morrison shook her head. I've been corresponding with colleagues in Montana, Colorado, Utah, Idaho. They're all reporting similar phenomena: lights, time anomalies, grid formations. The pattern extends across at least 6 states, possibly more. How far does it go? I don't know. But if it follows the same logic we've seen here, targeting major transportation infrastructure, focusing on hub cities and interstate corridors, then potentially it could cover the entire western United States, maybe more. The room fell silent. We were talking about something that dwarfed anything humanity had ever encountered. Not a local phenomenon, not even a regional one, but potentially a continental-scale operation. We need to go public, Sandra said. We need to warn people. With what evidence? Vickers asked. Photos that could be doctored? Testimony that sounds like science fiction? Instrument readings that skeptics will say prove equipment malfunction, not alien activity? We have 63 witnesses, I pointed out. And how many UFO sightings have there been over the decades? Thousands, tens of thousands? With hundreds of witnesses, photos, videos, and still no mainstream acceptance. We need irrefutable proof. We need something that can't be explained away. Dr. Morrison closed her laptop. The only irrefutable proof will come when they activate the grid again. And based on the pattern of escalation we've documented, that will happen soon. Very soon. How soon? Sandra asked. The intervals between major activations have been decreasing. First activation in March, small scale. Second in April, larger. Third in June, full grid deployment. If the pattern holds, we're looking at another activation within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And based on the increasing complexity, whatever comes next will be bigger than anything we've seen. She was right. 2 weeks later, on July 1st, at 3:51 a.m., the grid activated again. This time, it stayed active for 4 hours. This time, commercial airline pilots saw it. Traffic helicopters recorded it. Hundreds of civilians witnessed it and shared photos on social media. This time, the world noticed. And that's when everything changed.